beautiful community. We'd ask a special blessing at this time upon those that lives have been affected due to COVID, this pandemic. Bless them that they may feel of our love and support, and help us that we may be tender with one another. We're grateful for the opportunity we have of being on council, and help us that we may be mindful of our responsibilities and respectful, and help us that we may strive to make good choices. We're so grateful for all we have, and we know that all we have comes from Thee. These blessings we pray for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councillor. Well, today is the 27th day of April, 2021. It's a regular council meeting, and we have our media in attendance, and thank you, Corey, for being there for Channel 32. We also have our delegation, Mr. Patrick Treadwell, and we will at this time call the meeting to order and approve the agenda, and then we'll go on to our delegation. Okay, Councillor Brown?
I make a motion to approve the agenda of April 27th, 2021.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. We will note that we have two of our councillors that are on Zoom, Councillor Barnes and Councillor Bengry, and we have a councillor that is absent due to family issues. And thank you, Håkan, for being here today. So, Mr. Treadwell, so if you like to go ahead and present the audited statement, we would appreciate that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So if you see up here, I think I'm hopefully sharing my screen for the town of Cardston. But first off, thanks for this opportunity of working with MWG CPA. We've been working with the town here for about 3 years now. And it's definitely a delight. Thanks to Håkan for creating all the great working papers, and the team out at the town. Whenever we came out, I guess we came out in the middle or early March, and they were really helpful in helping us kind of working through our audit and our testing there. So again, I'm presenting the financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2020. I can jump into here. Our independent auditor's report. So I'm mostly just going through this auditor's report, which details what we kind of do for the town. So we start off the top here, the opinion, like I said, for the town of Cardston for December 31st, 2020. And then I'd like to jump down to, in our opinion, the accompanying financial statements present fairly, in all material respects, the financial position of the town at December 31st, 2020. So that statement there, that's a clean audit report. And so with that, we didn't find any issues. We didn't find any concerns in our testing. And the clean what player likes to see, and what hopefully you guys are going to be happy with. So if I keep going down there, we see our basis for opinion. So we base this clean audit report on the generally accepted auditing standards, which just kind of outlines our responsibilities and our details there that we went through. You see that responsibilities of management. So these statements are management statements because they are based on your transactions and your details provided in your MuniWare and bank statements and statements like that. And so we might help with preparation, presentation, because we did help prepare the statements, but in the end, management has accepted these and is responsible for the information included. Going down further, you see our responsibilities are kind of outlined here. You see on the second page of our independent auditor's report, you see what we kind of do here. We assess your risk of material misstatements in the financial statements here. We obtain understandings, and we like to kind of test and walk through the appropriateness of your internal controls and your accounting policies. So that's just ensuring that what you guys have in place is working effectively for what it's intended to. We also like to conclude on your use of going concern, which essentially means if you're going to shut down in the next 12 months, which we've kind of seen that's appropriate that you're not. And then we just kind of help with overall presentation, structure, and content of the statements. So from there, I mean, we didn't find any management letter points. There's no issues. There's no concerns in our eyes. We're not issuing any kind of reservations or anything like that. So we can kind of I think if Hawken is available, he can kind of start presenting on the statement of financial position and operations, depending where he wants to start.
Okay, so yes, Håkan is available indeed.
Good to go?
So,
Okay. It should do it.
and thank you for coming, and sure, go ahead at the pulpit.
The pulpit, all right. Do I have to keep this on?
No, you can take it off. You are
All right.
more than 6 feet apart, so you're fine.
All
Thank
right.
you. We can hear you better now.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Patrick. So these are our financial statements, but we'll still blame the auditor if there's anything wrong with them. No, I'm kidding. So there's basically 2 pages in this, I think it's a 26-page document that serve as the backbone for the whole thing. And it's on page 4 and 5. It's the statement of financial position and the statement of operations. So the statement of financial position is like the balance sheet at the end of 2020. It just shows the position. And then the statement of operations, it gives you the in-year story of what the town's operations look like in 2020. So if we just take a minute to look at the statement of financial position, this document is divided up into 2 main sections: the financial assets and the non-financial assets. So financial assets are those assets that are available to discharge our day-to-day operational liabilities and activities. The non-financial assets are your long-term assets that are not available. We use them in our operations, like all our tangible capital assets, our equipment, our inventory. It's not available for paying off bills and things like that. So the financial assets at the end of the year total $7.7 million. And we have that in a few different places. Some is in cash, some is in investments, a little bit in land, some receivables. The receivables balance at the end of 2020 was a little bit higher than normal. We had fronted quite a bit of money for our DRP project down on Lee Creek. We had also fronted quite a bit of money on MSI capital projects. The province is holding their money a little tighter these days, and they didn't pay us until just about a month ago. So, but in any case, $7.7 million, and then you put that against liabilities of $4.7 million, and you've got $3 million in net financial assets. Part of the liabilities is long-term debt, and we took on a fair bit new debt in 2020, and that was related to the solar farm. So the good news is that that debt is tied to an asset that actually generates income and nearly pays for itself. So really, if you were to back that long-term debt out of that financial assets or net financial assets line, you'd have net financial assets of essentially $6 million. So our reserves, our restricted funds, internally restricted funds, are approximately $5.6 million at the end of the year. And so with that $6 million, we've got enough to fund those reserves, as well as a little bit of working capital. So it's not a bad financial position. We took a big step back in 2020 by taking on that debt. but at least the asset does generate income to pay for the loan payments, so it's not all bad. So we were able to grow the tangible capital assets from 48 million, this is a book value, 48 million, up to 52 million. So if you take out the solar farm, the approximately $4 million that we spent on the solar farm, you know, really we just basically kept up with amortization. Our asset replacement kept pace with amortization. So anyway, that's probably all I had to say on the statement of financial position. Were there any questions about that page?
Councillor Selk?
So Håkan, you said that the solar farm almost paid for itself. How short were we?
I don't have the exact number, but we're within like a few thousand, like 10,000 or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Councillor, if I could comment on that too, we haven't had our full calendar year with it either.
That's fine.
So we don't have a full year to look at just yet until August.
Okay.
I just remember it didn't quite pay for itself, but it's close, so, yeah.
Over the 8 months that you had,
Yeah, it was more like 7, I think, so.
7 months.
We went live sort of when we were already
It was July, right.
into a peak season, so we
Right.
lost a little bit of peak time, I think, so.
Okay, so it'll be interesting to see what comes out, because they had told us that we should be really within the numbers they gave us, so it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
I'll be curious to see that. Thank you.
Yeah, so going on to the statement of operations, it was kind of a strange year, partly because of, mainly because of COVID, but it wasn't really what we expected when we set our mill rate budget. So who would have thought that the golf course would see the kind of revenues that it did? And that kind of surplus situation finds itself in a lot of different line items in on this page. But so just in the revenues section, we budgeted 5.9 million for user fees and sales of goods. So this would include like our water, sewer, garbage, like all the user fees at our different rec facilities and things like that. So 6.7 million, most of that variance is from the golf course. Now we did spend a little more at the golf course as well, but most of that variance is from the golf course. There's also a large part of that is from some custom work, an electrical custom work project that our electrical department took on. Government transfers for operating. So these are government grants for operating. It's mostly the DRP money. We had budgeted about 2.2 million for that, or we were approved for 2.2 million to complete that Lee Creek work, and we were able to complete it with about 1.7 million. So the investment income, when we set mill rate, we were, well, I guess I should say, first of all, we always go a little conservative on our budget for investment income because you never know what the market's going to do, but we certainly weren't ready to bump that up in the face of COVID. But in the end, our investment income was actually about $81,000 higher than what we budgeted. So kind of got lucky there, I guess. And then down into the expenses section, there was just a lot of stuff that was slowed down or postponed or whatever because of COVID, and like legislative, that would be our council expenses, came in $44,000 under budget. We had fewer meetings, fewer in-person meetings, less travel, no AUMA. The same kind of thing we saw in administration. There were a few initiatives that just didn't happen that we had budgeted for. Down in emergency measures and disaster service, this is the expense side of the DRP project at Lee Creek. Public Works, we didn't have as much expenditure on snow removal. There was a little bit less than we expected on street maintenance. Repairs and maintenance of machinery and equipment was less than we expected. Our fuel costs stayed a little bit lower than we expected. Fuel costs stayed low throughout the year.
Could I mention something, Mayor? Could I just mention one thing? On that emergency measures and disaster, it's important to remember that while we had a budgetary surplus, we don't have a cash surplus because we only get what we spent because it's a grant. So it's not as though they gave us the 2.2 million, we only spent 1.7 and we pocketed the difference.
No,
We only
that's okay.
submitted for 1.7, we just budgeted for 2.2.
Right.
So it's a budgetary surplus, but there's not a cash surplus.
Right.
Sorry, yeah. It would be great if it was, but there isn't. No.
No, it's on a reimbursement basis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Good point. So, another thing was we got the outfall line fixed. So we didn't spend what we had budgeted on fixing the outfall line, which is good. But we did a permanent fix. And so one of the items, like down in the other section, there's a line called gain loss on disposal of tangible capital assets. We wrote off the section of the outfall line that we replaced, and that section had a value of $511 or so $1,000. So we had to write that off, and then we replaced it. It cost us about $600,000 to replace it. So that gives you a little bit of an idea, I think, on historical value versus current replacement value. So that was, how old was that section? About 15 years or something?
No, it wasn't that. Oh, yeah. Boy, time flies. It's about that 13, 14 years, yeah.
Yeah. So something that cost us $500,000 13, 14 years ago cost, I think it was just over $600,000 now. So when we're amortizing pipelines and things underground that were put in for $20,000 40 years ago, and it costs us $100,000 now, you start to gain an appreciation for the dollar value of the assets that we're managing. So keeping pace with amortization really isn't good enough. And I think we're going to, with the work that we're doing in asset management, we're going to get a clearer picture of sort of our future, what we've already committed to as far as our future resources based on the assets that we already manage.
So, how can, if I try to understand what you just said, are you trying to say then that we need to start to be more aggressive in reserving money?
Well, I guess the proper answer right now is I don't know, because we haven't done the asset management plan.
Okay.
But I think it's pretty safe to say that we most certainly will.
Okay. So, in other words, can you give me a little bit of a sense timeline-wise? When you say you're going to work on the asset management plan, what do you have in mind? 1 year, 2 years? What do you think it's going to take to get that fixed up?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, look at me, man. This is on you.
It would be great to have it done by fall,
Yeah.
but that
Okay.
would be really ambitious.
All right, so, I mean, within a year from now, for sure.
Yeah, we'll have a better idea within a year from now.
Okay,
If we don't have it ready by the time we set budget in December, we should certainly have something for you by mill rate next year.
okay. So let's say May 2022 at the latest.
Yeah,
Okay. We hold you to it, you know.
well, good.
Thank you.
Deadlines help, right? So, I guess with that, can we go ahead and have a look at the reserves listing then?
Yeah, so, oh, sorry, Councillor Drew has something.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Revenue section, there's donations of $316,000.
That's for the spray park.
Oh, okay, all right, that's what I thought it was, but I just wasn't sure if,
Yeah,
okay.
So council, you have an 8.5, well, no, yours is legal size, I think. And it's just, it says in the top left-hand, detailed reserve listing, December 31, 2020. So this is to give you exactly where the reserves landed at the end of 2020. Actually, Mayor, do you mind if I preface this just a little bit?
Please go
Before
ahead.
Hawken goes through it? With how things were timed with the audit, Hawken and I placed all of the financial surplus in a reserve account, and we assigned it back to whence it came. Let's put it that way. So if it was derived from a utility surplus, we assigned the reserve back to a utility surplus. If it was arrived at from the golf course, we assigned it to the golf course, etc. So what that didn't do is give you as council maybe as much discretion over that reserve listing as you have had before. But what I would say to that is once this is passed, you still always have full discretion over every bit of the reserves. So this just gives us where we've placed everything for a point in time as of December 31st. But it's simply a resolution of council to move those. So don't get too worried if maybe some things aren't precisely where you wanted them. We just tried to put them back to where they were derived. And I think what I said there was correct, Hawken. I don't know if you have anything to add there.
no, that's right. So I kind of struggled to know in how much detail to go into it, but like we could go through each item, but I think that statement generally sums up kind of our approach to it.
Okay.
If
so-
we had a surplus in, the golf course, for example, we then put that surplus towards golf course reserves, as an example. Now, I would say that there is an exception to that, and there are some general government areas in our budget that had some surpluses. I don't know, like postage, for example. Like, where do you put that? Do we create a reserve item for postage? So we looked at some things like that, and then knowing that we have this major utility capital reserve, which we know we're going to need soon, we threw some of it at that. So.
Is there questions for Hawken regarding the reserves? So, Councillor Selk, go ahead.
Can you help me out here, Hawken? On the major capital reserve, you've got listed $602,989. Is that the wastewater treatment plant, because it's transferred to capital?
No, that's the
Previous
outfall
iteration
line.
of that, it was 1.1.
No.
That's the outfall
outfall.
line that we did in 2020. So remember and maybe we should remember we're looking backwards a year. Okay, so what you're looking at is you have the opening balance January 1, 2020. Anything we taxed or raised money for that we put into it is the next column. And then the one you're referring to, Councillor Selk, under transfer to capital, in 2020 we took money from that account to fund capital in 2020. And then the last one is where it balances out.
Because, like I said, in the previous iteration of this, you had 1.1 million in that line, in that, under transfer to capital.
So in 2021, we have using 1.1 million to go towards, if it all comes together in 2021, there's 1.1 million to go towards the plant.
Right.
But that's in 2021.
So that was the pro forma.
Yeah, we gave you a
reserves
pro
listing.
forma one to kind of estimate where we'd land at the end of this year based on what you had chosen to tax for. This is looking back just a bit.
This is the actual 2020, and the one that you're thinking of, I think, is the projected 2021 reserves listing.
Yeah.
So if you were to compare the December 31st, 2020 balance from this one that we're looking at now, 5.6 million, I think that should match the opening balance from the one that you're thinking of.
Yeah, I think I would agree.
Which is, yeah, anyway. I guess it could be confusing because we gave you the 2021 before we ever showed you the 2020. So, but in 2020, what we did was we funded the outfall line with major utility capital reserves. And then some of these miscellaneous general surpluses, we added to that reserve item. And so at the end of the year, we have 1.1 million. So we have in that reserve line what we need, or actually we have a little less than what we think we need, but
Did
we
you
have
say
the 1.1 million per the budget.
1.4?
No, 1.13. And actually, Hawk, and not to correct you, but I think that 600,000 wasn't fully for the outfall because 2/3 of that was debenture. So there was a third of that was outfall, and then there was a number of utility projects that we would normally fund through reserve.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that happened to match the total, but that wasn't what that whole thing was for.
I think a large portion of it was for major utility capital, but we did have,
We borrowed about 4, and then we used the rest from reserves to finish it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, anyway, what we have is, I mean, it's a long list. Do you guys want to go through it, or?
Well, go ahead, because those are probably the items that are the most important for us to consider, right?
Okay. I'll try to go through it quickly here. Like, office vehicle replacement, we added 6,000. We budget that every year. We add 6,000. So at the end of 2020, there was $34,000 to replace the admin vehicle. The antenna upgrades, we did the upgrade. There's a little bit left. Down in the budget carryover section, we saved a little bit of money in our professional fees in 2020, and so we're going to use that in 2021 to pay for some of the work we're doing with asset management planning. The general $100,000, this relates to a council directive from a year ago. You wanted to bring $100,000 into budget to just help offset budgetary pressures in 2020. So we did that. We used that. Down in protective and emergency services reserves, every year we always budget $4,000 for replacement of our bylaw vehicle. We had some surplus this year, and it was about $18,000, and so we just lumped that in with that item because we can kind of foresee that at the pace of 4,000 a year, we weren't going to get to where we wanted to as fast as we wanted to, so we took that opportunity to add to that item. The fire truck replacement, this is per budget. This is actually going to be gone here in about a year.
I'm gonna talk about that when I do the budget part.
So it's a good thing we have that item. Fire hall building replacement. We budget that amount every year. That's the amount of amortization on the fire hall building, and we just reserve it. Budget carryover, we were supposed to buy some radio dispatch equipment. We didn't, so we're gonna do that in 2021. Public Works and Transportation reserves. Heavy equipment replacement reserves. So when we do custom work, the sort of the non-cash recoveries from using our own equipment on our projects, we reserve that, and that helps fund our fleet replacement. I shouldn't say fleet replacement, our heavy equipment replacement. I guess fleet is like our pickup trucks and stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
So fleet replacement, that's something we just budget every year, 16,500. Just going back to heavy equipment replacement, we did pad that a little bit beyond what we had budgeted. The amount that we saved in like public works, machinery repairs, some of the fuel savings, we put that towards heavy equipment. When I did the budget, I think it was late last fall, I was looking ahead at our 5-year budget, and we were basically going to run out of heavy equipment reserves in it was like 3 years. And so I'm glad that we were able to find a little bit to pad that this year. Some of those equipment items are pretty pricey, and with MSI dwindling, it's nice to have a little extra. Some of the roads and streets, we saved a little bit, like I mentioned previously, and we put that towards roads and streets. It's something that we've never had in there before, is just something if an emergency came along or we needed to do something more with our roads, we have a little bit tucked away for that. Snow removal.
Hawken, what page are you on this? I'm trying to follow you here.
I'm on the. It's
Give the account number, that'll be easier.
we're in
Are
account.
you 2 of 9?
No, 410262.
We're in the reserves for public works and transportation account 410262.
It's on the back of the first page.
Well, I've got the wrong one.
Yeah,
You want me to share my screen? I think I have it
You're
here.
on here.
you need to
I'm
have,
still on the draft of the Town of Cardston financial statement.
no. You need to
Okay, so
have
which
the
one?
Town of Cardston detailed reserved listing.
Patrick, you just want to put it on the screen?
Does he have it?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, Hawken, you sent me this one a while ago.
So, what number again? I've got the page.
410262.
Thank you.
You're
Okay, I
welcome.
got it.
You got it? Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you for asking.
We're on the same page then?
Yes, we are.
Literally?
So I think we were about to look at, so crushing. Under scheduled non-annual operating expenses, these are things that we know are happening, but they don't happen every year. So we used our crushing reserves in 2020. So next year, we're going to bring another $40,000 in, and I guess I should say this year. And it's just kind of a cyclical thing. So snow removal, I think it was 2019 maybe. We spent a fair bit on snow removal and the snow blower attachment, I think it was, or something broke down.
Replace the motor on that snow blower.
So we took a big chunk out of the snow removal reserves, and so this 2020 we were able to replenish that a little bit. And then there was a few budget carryover items that we went through. We can permanently get rid of that airport carry forward thing now, so that's nice.
Where does that money go?
We just don't budget for it anymore.
Which money?
That's not a reserve then. We don't have $7,000 in that account anymore.
No. At the end of 2020, the balances were all zero because we had brought it all into the 2020 budget. So
Okay, thank you.
in the next account, the water reserves, we didn't have any changes in 2020, so just skip over that one. The next one, wastewater, we did have a few changes. They were basically all just carry forward stuff we just didn't finish or didn't start. So we're carrying forward a few things, and we have those in the 2021 budget. Next account is the garbage reserves. We put some of our surplus from waste management into waste management capital, and we also budget $10,000 a year for our recycling facility reserves. Next page is public health. Public health services, 410,266. So we had some surplus from our cemetery. Just our operating revenues were a little bit higher, and some of our expenses were a little lower. And then we also took in some extra perpetual care. Whatever we receive in perpetual care, we just added to the perpetual care reserves. And the thing with cemetery is you technically can't just absorb the surpluses from it into the general budget of the town. It has to be isolated, so we kind of have to do that with those. And then we spent a little bit less than expected on some weeds and weed and pest control contracts, and so we're carrying that forward to 2021. And then in planning and development, there were a few lots sold that had off-site levies, so we reserved those amounts that we collected. Generally, there was a little underspent in planning. We have one of the things that we have in planning budget is like just some miscellaneous engineering. Sometimes we use it, sometimes we use more than what we had budgeted. It's just good to have in case we need to engineer a project that we want to do a grant application for, something like that. So we didn't spend what we had budgeted in 2020, so we reserved that. And then the ECDev, 33,200. Some of that is for, I believe, for some of our like a study, a trade corridor study, maybe, or I forget exactly what that item is from.
Yeah. The billing came on a lot of that came after December 31st.
So the next page, Parks and Recreation Reserves, 410,268. The rec master plan, we brought in $272,000. Most of that was just budgeted. I think $255,000 of that was budgeted. And then there was a little bit of surplus that was brought in there. And then we funded some of our capital projects with that rec master plan reserve as well. And so some of it came out, and we ended up with $412,000 in that item. And campground reserve, this was one item that had a lot of uncertainty when we set mill rate last year. So we were in the midst of our campground expansion, but we weren't sure what kind of restrictions there would be on camping. So we ended up scaling back the revenue budget, and we failed to scale back the expense budget for that, for the campground. So as it happened, our revenues were basically what they had always been, and so we had this surplus from the campground. So we put that back towards the campground reserve. So in the golf course, I guess the net surplus for the golf course was the $442,000. So that's how much we were able to add there. So for the golf course, we have $575,000 in reserves at year end, plus some contingency fund down in a couple sections below that. There's about $99,000 for the golf course there as well. Just some surplus for the civic center that we put towards that.
Sorry, I just have a question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, so you just said the contingency for the golf course, there's that 99,762. So why are those two separate? The contingency fund is just a separate fund that was made for...
It's an operating contingency.
Yeah.
So if we had like a major operating expense come up that was going to throw us way over budget, that's what that's intended to soften.
And you wouldn't combine the two, why?
Because the other one's, well, you can do that at your wishes, but the other one's intended to be for capital.
Okay.
So planned capital,
Yeah.
where this is mid-year, a
Crisis.
major pump goes, we need 60 grand. I'm coming to council and saying, can we transfer from that because we've got a wreck?
Okay, thank you.
Or like when we had the pivot that all went,
Yeah. Or
when the
something
pressure
came
was so
through.
high, we lost who knows how
Yeah.
many ads.
Yeah.
That was a lot of money that year.
The golf course is it's sensitive to that kind of thing. So we have some weather issue and we lose all the greens, for example. And whether they come out of the winter with snow mold on them and they all die and we've got to buy all new turf. And there's just these really volatile, expensive items around that place.
Okay, thank you.
And I
Good
think
question,
maybe
though.
one reason why there's well is, I don't remember, but when we took over the golf course, there was some reason why it was an operating contingency at that point. We weren't totally sure what we were looking at. There was a lot of uncertainty as far as
that's
what the
right.
operational numbers would look like. And so it's still sitting there. We haven't moved it, but
So that's
it
when
could be
we-
moved.
Oh, sorry. That's
Go
when we
ahead.
took over from Black Sands.
Yeah.
We weren't sure what we were getting back.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's always a bit of a historical context to why the numbers are where they are in a document like this, but anyway, then there's quite a few just budget carry forward items. Maybe one that I'll hit on is the surplus county ICF contribution. So during the year, that ICF amount was finalized. The county paid us the new amount. We had budgeted the old amount. So we're going to carry forward the surplus from that. Electrical reserves.
Can I back up a minute?
Go ahead, Councillor
I
Bounds.
wanted to ask a question on and maybe Councillor Court I don't know, is he around?
No, Councillor Court is not here.
Okay, so I was wondering about the card home improvements. Is that going to happen this year with that $20,000?
You want me to
Is
speak
that
to
a
it?
question for?
Councillor Barnes, it is not currently budgeted in this year. However, we have, sorry, the agency's escaping me right now. We did have an assessment of the facility done, and it's just going to depend on really, we just got to look at when we got to get those improvements done. So we put a little money aside for it. We know we've got 6 figures worth of work that could be done on the place.
Yeah.
That just happened to be from a previous year, and it's been a number of years ago. There was a bit of surplus we left for that, but we don't have anything in 2021 for that work right now.
Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah, and the electrical reserves, that's the last category for our reserves. We do fund some of our capital items from electrical reserves. There was actually a major repair to one of our electrical trucks. It was the double bucket truck, so we had to pull from that. And they also purchased a
Flatbed.
yeah. Anyway, there was a couple of little purchases.
Has
When
the
you say
flatbed
little-
been purchased
Oh.
or not?
The what, Mayor?
The flatbed, you know, they were going to have a trailer.
The pole trailer?
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah, it was approved in the January iteration. And
so
we
it is
proceeded with
part
that.
of that,
Yep.
right?
Yep. So no, sorry, it isn't in that 95. It's a 2021
Okay,
expense.
so that's what I was wondering.
2021.
It's upcoming,
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
Is that the one that we're buying from Fort McLeod?
correct.
There was a little bit of electrical upgrades and some communications equipment that was required at the solar farm in addition to the NMAX contract.
Yeah, the panels.
And so we funded that with, that was the 16,000. And then we had some budgeted additions to electrical reserves, and then we, like I mentioned previously, we did some custom work. And the electrical department did some custom work, and so we tagged that as electrical reserves as well. And I don't know how much those electrical trucks cost. Last I heard, it was like $300,000 a piece. And
Oh, I think you're a little light, my friend.
yeah,
I think they're about 400 now.
so I think we have 2 of those. And so anyway, you know, to have 773,000 in electrical reserves isn't bad. That $236,000 transmission rider reserve, that's like a buffer for the town to absorb some of the ups and downs in the rider rates that we get charged. Instead of manually changing our rates throughout the year and paying Kevin Phillips to do all that, and we just kind of have this reserve amount and we absorb it. So in any case, $5.6 million in reserves, and you can see the breakdown. There's a little summary table there at the very end, which shows you how much is in each department. So
Mayor, I have a question.
Councillor Bounds, go ahead.
On that non-annual operating expense transmission rider reserve, how often is that rider changed? Is that like
Annually.
every 3 months or something, or?
No,
No, we do it
No.
annually, Councillor.
we pass it by resolution every year. Once a
Oh,
year.
have we ever spent that much?
I'll speak to that. real
Go
quick.
ahead.
So, Councillor, why we started doing that, you as a council amend your bylaw annually, but Fortis has the ability to change it quarterly. And a few years back, it was before this term, we ran into an issue where we set it on an annual basis, and then it got increased every quarter through the rest of the year. And we ended up having to pay far more than what we'd budgeted on that line item. And so we had to institute a rider the next year to try and recapture some of that. And the council of the day didn't want to put a rider on for a year, take a rider off, put a rider on, take a rider off. So anytime we've had surplus, we've put it in there for that. And we've kind of capped it. We haven't added much more to it for a little while. We think it's at a spot where even with a major change that would cover it. That's why you don't see anything added to it again this year.
Okay.
The amount
Yeah,
that we,
because I thought there was something with Fortis making those rate changes on a quarterly.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
yeah,
All right, so Håkan, that is your presentation of your budget. Thank you so much for all your hard work. But now it behooves us to approve the 2020 audited financial statement. And if you are okay with approving the reserve as they are given, knowing that council still has control over the distribution of reserve afterwards by way of motions. So I'm ready to entertain a motion to approve the 2020 audited financial statement. Councillor Selk.
Move to approve the 2020 audited financial statements.
Thank you. Is there any question regarding those? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you.
Aye.
All right. So if you are all right and regarding the reserve listing is not exactly possibly the way it might land at the end, but the total amount is there and could be approved as such. Councillor Drew?
I make a motion to approve the December 31st, 2020 reserves listing.
All right. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. So Håkan, thank you very much. And Mr. Treadwell, thank you very much also for being there with us. We appreciate that. I'm not so sure that is still there.
Yeah. Thanks, Patrick. We'll talk to you tomorrow and tidy things up.
Great, thanks. Actually, Jeff, I might send you an email just with a clean copy so you can grab some signatures from councillors.
Sounds good.
Great.
So
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. And Håkan, I am really pleased to know that we have a clean audit and with absolutely no points brought forward that deserve attention. So thank you very much for your excellent work for the town. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
All right. So thank you so much.
Yeah, see you, Patrick.
All right, I see that we have our delegation at this point. We have Ms. Rayanne Spotted Bull, but I'm not so sure who you have with you. You might need to help us, and I would say, okay.
My husband, Russell Spotted Bull.
All right, thank you very much.
Can I have your Wi-Fi?
Yeah. Here, come on up here. We'll get it sorted out. Yeah.
Okay.
Go to, yeah, just go to that one there. That's the one that's popping up. And try capital C Cardston. We can have, do you want to be on the projector?
I guess so.
Or do you just want to use this?
I prefer the whiteboard.
Okay,
That's
that's
what sorry.
So C.
Are you Jeff?
Yeah.
Hi, Jeff.
Yeah, we've just been emailing, I guess.
Okay.
So capital C Cardston, Cardston, 16. That should do the trick. Yeah, make sure that does it. I'd say no on that one. You don't need to connect to anything. That work? Cool.
Good evening, everybody.
I think you're good there.
Oh, yeah. The whiteboard.
Now I recognize you, Russell.
I
Yes.
know you know him.
Yeah, you're definitely closer. Now I can recognize you. Thank you.
Better marker. Oh, okay.
Okay,
You got all kinds of stuff.
I do.
Last time I seen you, you had your two boys.
Yeah. So just one each then?
Yeah.
We got a few attending virtually here, so yeah,
Okay.
this will be.
Bear with me. Thank you.
Thank you.
So they also have all the links and everything, that email that Gerry sent.
Okay,
So they have all that on their computers.
okay. Thank you.
And those diaries, so you're good to go?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
they're
I'm gonna
tacked.
get you a better one, so.
I'm doing this. Sorry, guys. Bear with me. It's all good. Magnets to hang those up.
Oh, I don't know how magnetic this thing is. That's what I
Oh, really?
Yeah, let's see.
No,
I think
it's not.
just
Oh, it's
a white
not?
board. It's not magnetic.
Okay, too bad, guys. Can I hand these out to go around?
Oh, yeah, if you
Can
want,
we-
we can pin it.
Oh, you can pin it?
Yeah.
Now
Yeah,
or-
sure.
Yeah, there's just some tacks in that top corner.
Let's bring this off there.
We can get them printed. Well, I guess I can check right here, actually. I can check on my phone. There is a gun there. Yep. Yep. So we'll wait for those and then.
See? Sorry.
So Rayanne and Russell, are you both going to present? Or
Me.
Aaron? Okay. Rayanne, you are given about 15 minutes?
Yes.
Would that work?
That works for me,
All right.
hopefully.
Thank you.
I timed it. I think I have 3
So
minutes.
we will.
All
we
goes
will-
well.
We will listen to you afterwards. If there are questions, councillors can ask questions.
Okay,
Okay?
okay.
Thank you.
Can I take this off to talk?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Are you ready? I don't look at you, I'm looking at the words. Okay. This is about Bill C-15, or the new UNDRIP legislation about to be tabled for the third reading in Parliament. So thank you, Mayor Kronen and Cardston Town Council members for allocating me these 15 minutes tonight. My name is Rayanne Walton Spottable. I live on the Blood Reserve near Laverne. My husband is Russell Spottable, a Blood Tribe member, of which some of you know. Hence Maggie.
Yes.
Okay. We are parents of 6 Blood Tribe member boys ranging in age from 25 to 12. We are also LDS, who you can say we hold strong Christian values. My mother, Gerry Walton Sarah, who initially contacted the town of Cardston about Bill C-15, or the UNDRIP pending legislation, is also lives beside me on the Blood Reserve. She is retired and has been a journalist for the Cardston Chronicle, the Lethbridge Herald. Sorry, click in here. And the Business Examiner on Vancouver Island. She's also been repeatedly published in the LDS Ensign. She's also been an executive director for the LRH, as well as others on Vancouver Island. She's not here tonight because she's actually in Nanaimo, but she wishes she could be here in attendance. I've handed you some information tonight that goes along with the presentation I'm doing this evening. So, and it starts out with the Government of Canada's implementation guide of Bill C-15. Okay. The purpose of this bill is to affirm the declaration of as a universal international human rights instrument with application in Canadian law. When it says universal international human rights, it's referring to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a document that is not legally binding. UNDRIP, when legislated, will be legally binding. Article 2 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says, everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth without distinction of any kind, of such as race, color, sex, religion, language, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property of birth, or status. Remember, this is not legally binding. In the UNDRIP document that will be legally binding, under the annex, paragraph 4, an alarming change has been made, affirming further that all doctrines, policies, and practices based on or advocating for superiority of peoples or individuals on the basis of national origin, racial, religious, ethnic, or cultural differences are racist, scientifically false, legally invalid, morally condemnable, and socially unjust. Many treaties and agreements and constitutions were technically framed on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But now with this new UNDRIP legislation, and many peoples will lose, and its binding or legal implementing implications, many people will lose the rights they thought they had. Once passed by Parliament, this legislation would require that the government of Canada to take all measures necessary to, let's read that. I want you to look at the rule of law, the circles in the pictures in your pamphlets I gave you. If you look at the individual, we can clearly see we're losing rights already. It's about to get worse. Sorry. I'm scrolling. As it is written, as this bill is written, this bill would require to address injustices. Now, I want you to pay attention to these words with the new definition of Indigenous. It will combat prejudices, and it will eliminate all forms of violence and discrimination against Indigenous peoples. And the new definition is this, including elders, youth, children, women, men, persons with disabilities, gender diverse, and two-spirit persons. Sorry. Many Canadians that are aware of the UNDRIP document, Native and non-Native, are under the impression that the traditional term of Indigenous is synonymous with Aboriginal. And believing such, it is stirring up a lot of fear, contention, and discord between them, or should I say between Canadians. In this paragraph, it defines who Indigenous is. Do you see the word Aboriginal here? They can't use the word Aboriginal, for Aboriginal insinuates a race of peoples or ethnical group which now they have deemed racist or scientifically false and legally invalid. I would say with confidence that Indigenous is all of us. Sorry. This UNDRIP document, Annex Paragraph 2, Indigenous peoples are equal to all other peoples while recognizing the rights of all peoples to be different, to consider themselves different, and to be respected as such. Can you see with this legally binding document that Canadians, Native and non-Native, are about to have even more contentions? Boy, the devil is the author of contention, and so is this pending legislation. If this legislation is passed by Parliament, the Government of Canada, in collaboration with Indigenous partners, will begin preparing the action plan upon its completion. Table the plan in both the House of Commons and the Senate and make it available to the public. Who are these partners? From the paragraph below, partners are communities, industry, and all Canadians, the Indigenous. They are about to table this UNDRIP legislation or Bill C-15 for the third reading soon. It will be passed, especially when good men and women do nothing. If passed by Parliament, the legislation would create a lasting framework to advance the federal implementation of the Declaration. For Indigenous, the new definition, peoples, communities, industry, and all Canadians. A legislative framework will also ensure sustained, continued efforts to uphold the rights of all Indigenous people, now and in the future. Where do we see this word sustainable? Do we not see it in the UN Sustainable Development Goals or their SDGs? The Paris Agreement was one of the first set out agendas. It started back with the Harper government and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Just this past January, during his live news conference, he was going to push harder the Paris Agreement targets to achieve the global standard. Please look carefully at the images I provided for you in accompanying with your package. Cardston, you are already playing in this UNDRIP framework. And based upon what we have already learned this evening, and as a Christian-based community, mouse. And as a Christian-based community, this is not such a good thing. It begins with you, technically. With the Agenda 21 initiatives, there is even a local Agenda 21 planning guide that I know municipalities are using to govern their bylaws by. I will share with you words from it, but first I want to reference again back to the UNDRIP document, Annex Paragraph 1. The General Assembly, guided by the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations and good faith in fulfillment of the obligations assumed by the states, hence Canada, or should I say Great Britain. Of which Canada is a Commonwealth country of, in accordance to the Charter, which is why this Bill C-15 is passed federally and why the people of Canada will hear about it if you are paying attention after the fact. Back to the local Agenda 21 planning guide. No one fully understands how or if the sustainable developments can be achieved. However, there is growing consensus that it must be, that it must be accomplished at the local level if it is ever to be achieved on a global basis. At the local level, sustainable development requires that local economic development supports community life and power, using talents and resources of local residents. Sustainable development, therefore, is a program of action for local and global economic reform. So, Cardston elected officials, how far are we as a community going to let this evil infiltrate us? On a religious note, that we will soon be deemed morally condemnable by law literally, I'm going to quote the book of Revelations. Chapter 13, verses 7 through 9. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds, tongues, and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. And I leave this with you tonight, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Rayanne, for your passionate presentation. You brought some interesting point forward. Are there questions for Rayanne? No. Councillor Brown?
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate you coming, taking the time to come. I guess my question would just be, so what is your request for council? What do you want? Are you looking for a letter of support?
I am.
Sorry, I'm just trying
That's
to.
okay. I'm looking for a letter of support because I'm trying to warn the rest of the Christian-based community, hence Cardston district, about the pending legislation. And that I know that they passed it already in BC, and we could already see the implications among tribal members that believe it's Aboriginal and the fighting that's happened over lands there. And it's not about Aboriginal, it's about people. So because they've changed the definition, we're causing fighting. And because Alberta hasn't implemented yet provincially, and I know they're planning to do it federally, the implementation to us provincially is about to take shape. And I don't want that to happen because as a Christian-based province, ground Bruce people, whether you're LDS or not, it's going to implement, it changes everything. When you look at all doctrines and policies and practices, how many churches have policies and practices? Or even schools have policies and practices governing the fact that we don't fit into this new diagram. And the one that we fit in is legally unjust. Okay, so it implies everybody. Really, we're under attack now. And I like to think of that scripture, that song, who's on the Lord's side who? Now's the time to show. We ask it fearlessly. We need to see who we are by our determination to not let this be governed over us, but to overcome it by what we do now. And that's what my encouragement is. That's what I'm moving with. And I'm not going to cease until I'm heard. I've already emailed many band councils across Canada about this. And they're like, for those who are listening, they can see the advocacy of what it is I'm saying about the document is not accurate to what it is they're portraying it to be. And they're congratulating me and are asking for Zoom meetings to go through it further because I don't want a war between the natives and the non-natives. But I want us to come together reconcilably to stop what it is that's about to become law. It's basically a handover to the United Nations. If you look through the document further, you'll see that. Hence, Canada is no longer Canada anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thanks. We will discuss your presentation later on. Thank you.
Yes, I
So
will
we'll
move.
take all that back?
Yes, I will.
Jeff, I just want to get a quick picture.
Yeah, please.
And if you do favor this in any degree, I would love a recommendation for McGrath and Sterling and Raymond and Glenwood and other places, so I can share this with them too.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have one more question, actually.
Go
Sorry.
ahead.
I just have one more question. Sorry. So does the Blood Tribe Chief and Council, are they on, are they support of this?
They are not aware of it. I tried getting a hold of them, which is surprising. I mean, I guess there's someone here that has been involved in those land discussions, and so I don't know where that status is, but technically when this is passed, they can say based upon the fact that they're an indigenous group of people, you have no more standing with this legal claim because you're now deemed legally invalid.
Hasn't-
Haven't. There's other tribes like in Ontario that have asked for Zoom meetings and stuff,
Okay, great.
and so I'm slowly.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your documentation.
Yeah, it'd be good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Drive safe.
All right, so we shall carry on our adoption of the minutes. The regular meeting of council of April 3rd, we need to approve those minutes. Thank you, Councillor Barnes, go ahead.
I move to adopt the minutes of the town council meeting held April 13th, 2021.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. All right, so let's go ahead and deal with 6, bylaw and policy, budget 2021. And especially the recreation facility reserve. So at this point, what we have done, we have approved the general amount of reserves as given. But Jeff, if you want to walk us through.
Sure. Before we get to reserves, what I wouldn't mind doing is you have, this is a kind of familiar budget document. I put it on 11 by 17 for you guys. So what this one, yeah, and you've seen this in the last meeting as well. We've had a couple of small tweaks to it. This is simply showing what did we pass in January, what have we changed since then, and where are we sitting today? And if you don't mind, Mayor, I wouldn't mind just going through that reasonably
Please
quick,
go
maybe
ahead.
into our dinner break, and then we can go from there. What I'd like to see, Council, is we've got to bring you a draft mill rate bylaw at CCW next week. We could bring it in 2 weeks to the first meeting as well, but it's nice to have a chance to have a go at it once before the meeting. We got to pass it. So what I said in the background, as you'll recall, is we've got the budget, and we can discuss the items in there to get a gauge. I'd like to get a gauge how comfortable you are passing this version of it, if we're getting there. I know we have a big mountain to climb on the reserves piece. If we're only affecting reserves, it won't affect the budget, so the budget could continue. Or if we need to tweak some things in the budget, we still have time to do that. We're okay. But by the second week of May, we need to pass our mill rate bylaw.
Right.
So that we can get the notices out and stay compliant with all the timing. So, in this version of the budget, there's a lot of little changes that I won't go through. Our insurance exact bills came in, just little stuff like that. We had a few tweaks with the passing of BART and reallocating some of that wage, and you'll see our pension and payroll benefits things changed because of that. So it's mostly a lot of little things. There's just a couple of things I wanted to bring to your attention. Now, anything in the blue is things that's changed since you last saw it, but we didn't really talk about it that thoroughly last time, so I do want to hit on just a few things that aren't in the blue as well. One of them is, so if we're on the revenue page, the very first page, 172402, once again, we're unsure with restrictions how a lot of our rec facilities, campgrounds, you're going to see this as a reoccurring theme again. Right now, under the regulation, we can open the pool so long as there's no more than 10 people in the facility at any given time, including instructors.
Cool.
It doesn't make any sense to do that if that's the regulation, right?
I mean,
so we're once again juggling, what do we do with revenues? What do our expenses, staffing look like? And that'll come down to the wire as it has been over the last year, I'm sure. Because we're just responding to the COVID numbers, right? So
So I
Councillor
think last year, were we able to, I know we did a lot of revenue with families that wanted their own private.
Yep.
So is it still 10 people, or can a family of?
I know households can still rent for their household. But they are doing things like, so any indoor recreation facility in the province right now or pool can only do that training, and it has to be less than 10 people in the whole group, including the instructor, and that's carried over to pools. But there's not many pools that are going to open for those kind of numbers. So, you know, if Doug and a lifeguard are in the pool, then that's 8 people that can be in the lesson. You know, it's just, we have to really be cautious with all that stuff.
So, Jeff, you're bringing an interesting point. Every year we have the lifeguards. Those are those students that come and help us.
Yeah.
So, are you going to hire them still and have them there
Well,
bystanding?
last year we opened the pool very late because the restrictions came in, I want to say in June. Does that sound
it
right?
was.
Yeah, we didn't open May 20, the third week of May like normal.
Yeah.
The problem is, Mayor, if we don't at least try and capture some of these kids early, they find
And
out
you
their
lose
summer work.
them. That's a whole problem.
And you can't just pick up a kid off the street to be your lifeguard. That's not
Of
how it
course
works.
not.
So we
So-
are going to try and make modest commitments to the staff, but they also understand that some of this is out of our control.
Okay, are they a student that we can involve in other area of the operation?
Well, that depends if we want to carry all that payroll without offsetting
Well,
revenue.
that's what I'm wondering.
Right.
How far do we go?
Yeah, we'll have to look at, and now I'm hopeful, I'm cautiously optimistic that, you know, we're going to see our way through this a little bit soon. But, I mean, May is 3 days away.
The restrictions right now are until when? Is that,
I don't think there's any time frame on it.
There
Our
was
hospitalizations
no-
are over 600 and something now, ICU's at 140 something.
okay.
I don't think they're have any time frame at all.
Okay, Councillor Brown, Councillor Drew.
So, because I run swim club, Joseph Scow, a couple weeks ago, it could be a month ago, asked different people within the communities of his area that run like baseball, softball, swim club, soccer, to be on a Zoom meeting. And so he met with all of us. I was just representing swim club. That was who I was representing, and pools. And he was asking questions, finding out information, and then he took the information back with him, and he's requested that we have another meeting in regards to rec for the summer this Thursday. So I will be on that again. And I was talking to him actually last night. I ran into him, and I just said, you know, is it real? Like, what are you hearing? Is it realistic? And of course, what I'm saying is just hearsay, because everyone is speculating until it actually comes over the pulpit, right? But what he's hearing, and my understanding is that they're still really thinking that they will be opening June 1st. Okay. That as far as pools go, sorry, I'm speaking in regards to pools, and softball and baseball and all of those mid-May is what they're looking at. They're still looking at mid-May. He told everyone to go ahead and do registrations. Of course, last year I did registrations and had to give everyone back their money due to COVID. But this year, he's saying the way it's looking more favorable just because of people getting their COVID shot and getting ahead of the game a little bit. So he said they're starting to see the numbers drop, and as those things will open up. Yeah. So again, pure speculation, but I am in a meeting on Thursday, and we'll see what we hear.
And so, I've got a meeting on Wednesday with Dr. Hinshaw as well. All the CEOs do. We talk about that a lot too.
Good. Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. I hope those two bodies
speak the same language.
Speak the same, so that we at least get one message. Councillor Drew?
We can't operate the facility to full capacity. Is there some grant money available? The government's going like most.
We're at this point. We were fortunate in 2020 to have the most funding to make up any shortfalls. Well, and I should say into March of 2021 is what it carried through. But we're not aware of any programming beyond that. So, and again, we're really just, everything's happening kind of on the fly here with this whole pandemic, right? So I just want to let you know some of the changes, I won't go over them all, we're just trying to take some guesses on revenues, thinking there may be some restrictions, or at least later openings than normal.
Can I ask a quick question before we move
Please
on?
go ahead.
And I'm just trying to understand if Councillor Drew would address this question. The money that we were supposedly to get for any losses because of COVID, is that what Councillor Drew was mentioning?
Yeah, that's a most grant.
Coming.
Okay, did we use any of it?
But we used 100% of it.
Awesome.
Yeah, we used 100% of it. Now, but what I was saying is it only applied to revenue losses through March 31st of 2021.
Right.
So nothing after that.
Okay.
But yes, we've reconciled it, I think, and it's all done, isn't it? Yeah, we've submitted everything. It's fully reconciled and done. It's one of the reasons why, well, it helps with 2021's budget because as if you go through, you'll see there's 335,000 or 265,000 of most grant that came forward into 2021. Now, some of that had hard costs attached to it. In fact, a great deal of it did. But another great portion of it was just compensation for lost revenues. So it was cash and some taxes that were unpaid as of March 31st and things like that. So that helped this budget quite a bit.
Awesome. Thank you.
So there's nothing more on the first page. I only just wanted to point out on page 200, we do anticipate we've commenced with some legal items there that will have some higher than normal legal costs to see that through. On page 3, the one I wanted to talk about is down at 223,200. Councillor Selk, you can probably chime in on this one too. Danny is proposing that we commence the purchase of a new fire truck immediately. The market is strong for used trucks. So we have a truck that I believe, Councillor, is approaching 20 years old. So it's at its time under the regulations to go. He feels he can get a good dollar for it. He sent a proposal. Now, a new fire truck is $502,000, by the way. So what he's looking for, and there's two lines I want you to look at on this. Under 223,200, you see in the middle there it says additional requisition for fire truck, $60,000. So we're intending on spending that this year. So we have to put a deposit down for the chassis. And that, for our portion, at 40% of the truck, will be $60,000 of the chassis. Then just the 3 sections down, 223,765, is fire transfer to reserves. And so every year we've been putting somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000 away for that future truck. Unfortunately for us, we bought the last one 2 years ago. And so we were starting from zero 2 years ago. That's why one of the reasons in the reserves that you saw, we had a little bit of surplus on a few things and we were able to put some additional into reserves in 2020. So we have $87,000 going into 2021. We're going to put $50,000 in 2021. So now we're at about 130 and change. We're going to spend $60,000 in 2021. So that puts us back to about 75,000 or so left in there. And then in 2022, we have another $50,000 intended to be taxed to go in there, which is going to bump us up to pay 40% of the rest of the truck in 2022. It'll leave us about 10 grand is what it'll leave us in that reserve if everything stays equal. So we've run the math and it looks like with our current 50,000 a year, and we bumped that from 40,000 a couple of years ago, it looks like we'll be okay for this truck. And then we do have, I talked to Danny yesterday, we've actually got a pretty good gap until the next truck. I think we have 7 years, I think, until we have to replace the next one that's 20 years old. Did he bring that up at all, Councillor Selk?
No.
Go ahead.
I'm curious what truck that would be.
I don't know. I just asked him. I said, when's the next one? He said, well, we got one in 2028, he thinks. And it might be in Glenwood.
Okay,
It might be one of the outer ones.
right, but we're not responsible to pay for that. It's the county in Glenwood, right?
I don't think so. I think we have a role there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that exactly. Okay. I hope you're right, by the way.
Yeah, I
I
hope
don't
so
know why
too.
we would pay for Glenwood's truck. They're not paying for ours.
Well, aren't they paying a portion like 5% or something like that?
But not on
No?
capital.
Is that not on the capital? Okay, well, then you're probably right.
Yeah,
Only on the operating.
okay.
And so the capital is, that's why it's 60/40 between us and the county.
Yeah.
And that's
Okay.
the numbers that Danny's hashing out
Yeah.
there is our
Okay.
share, the county share,
Okay.
and all those things. So it's like, yeah, no, we're not paying for their
We
truck.
can get clarity on that. He just mentioned that we had a bit of a gap here now to rebuild the.
Well, it'll
the
be
reserve.
interesting to know for sure.
Like, one of the things that we have done is that they have sort of an emergency response truck.
Right.
Yeah,
That we bought the chassis and they took the tank and everything off of it and put on the chassis, and we just bought that a year ago.
oh,
Yeah.
But that came out of reserve funds that the authority had,
yeah.
so, yeah, no, we're not paying for a fire truck in Glenwood.
Okay, I think Councillor Barnes has something there.
Go ahead, Councillor Barnes.
Yeah,
Maybe you want to.
listening to,
clarify that for us.
you know,
I'm pretty
what's
sure
going on
it's
with
not
the
the
sales.
I think you are right.
If we're selling our 20-year-old vehicle, is there not a possibility to buy a used vehicle for someplace like Glenwood? You know, we're always talking replacing brand new, but yet somebody out there is buying the used trucks, fixing them up, and being able to use them. So, you know, are we in the market only of a brand new,
A
or?
bit more complicated. I
But
think
you-
Councillor Selk is going to give you an answer for that.
Good.
The way it works, Counselor, is that every province regulates the,
Number of hours.
yeah, what the lifespan is for a fire truck. And the province of Alberta says ours is 20 years old. So Acres, the guy that are, not Green Acres, but Acres is buying this vehicle, and they're going to refurbish it for another community in another province that will meet the standards of that province. And they're giving us a pretty fair deal on it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so regulated,
Yeah. Yes, it
so
is.
very regulated.
Right.
Okay, so
Thank you.
my short story there is if we continue on, the amount we're taxing and putting away will be okay in both 2021 for the deposit and 2022 to complete.
Right.
So we're fine there. Page 4.
Just a question there.
Oh, sorry.
So this is gonna come up in the next week, because I think Danny's looking for a motion from the board to go ahead and do
Oh,
this.
yeah.
So we're comfortable with this, are we, Jeff? We're comfortable with
Yeah,
this
yeah.
monetarily speaking?
Yeah, we're okay because we have 87,000 in there right now.
Right.
And we need 60 for the chassis deposit.
Right. And
So-
then we'll need the rest in
Right,
2022.
but with our 2022, we'll be within, I think it's just a few $1,000, but we'll be okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
so
we
you can
proce-
represent
we can
us.
Proceed then.
Yeah, if it's approved in this budget, which you have to do in the next little bit here, then we're all good to go.
Good, perfect.
Do you have a price on what we're getting for the old truck?
75, I think.
1,000?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yes.
the new one is 500.
No, I'm just
Yeah.
kind of curious as to.
Straight across.
You have to recognize that the chassis, Counselor Drew, I know what you're thinking, but the chassis have like 20,000 kilometers or 25,000 kilometers on it, but
Yeah.
all the other internal workings are 20
Yeah.
years old, so it's like, yeah, strip it all out if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the last one cost about 450,000, so it's already up.
Yeah. Apparently, according to Danny, there's pretty high demand for emergency vehicles. They're hard to get. I mean, this one will be 18 months before we get it.
Right.
I mean, that's, well, maybe a little better than a year, maybe up to 14 months to even get the thing.
That's 20 years old?
This one that we're trading in is 20
Yeah,
years old.
it's
or-
20 this year, yeah.
Yeah, I think it will be next year, it'll be 20 years old,
Yeah,
but we're just
yeah,
getting a
okay.
jump on it by a year.
Yeah.
Because they're giving
Well,
us.
but they have to keep it until the new one's built. We can't go without one, right?
Right,
So
so
we'll
they-
have this current one until like May or June next year.
Right, right,
Yeah. And they'll hold their price, so,
yeah.
That's a good
That-
thing.
That's the biggest thing, is they will hold the
Yeah.
price on it,
yeah.
even though we're using it.
Yep.
And they
So
come from the
that's the one that
States,
needs to
don't
go to
they?
all the far calls.
Manitoba.
That's,
They come from Manitoba.
Yeah, it's the Hatarian Brethren of wherever,
Really?
and that's what they do. That's all they do, is they make fire trucks.
Fantastic.
yeah.
And they
Nice.
make really good ones too.
Yeah. Shem just went to grab food, so we'll go until he's back here. Page 4, There wasn't much here, like really small little things. One thing you'll see, there's a bunch of notes that say transferred to this, transferred to that. The water department, Curtis and Wade, have asked if we can break out some of their expenses so they can more easily see on a month-to-month basis where they are with their testing budgets and other budgets. So we just added some other GLs and then transferred money out. There's no new money in those accounts necessarily. It's just been moved out of the one lump sum operations account into some specific accounts for our own internal, just we can keep, the boys can keep track of it a little better.
Day-to-day.
I wanted to mention, unfortunately, we have a couple of these things I'll talk about. 241502, our pump in the lateral K died. They had to get a new pump in there. It was $7,500 because we have to have that pump for the golf course to water early. Other than that, then the same story is at 243503, just down the page, garbage, general repairs. Both furnaces in the recycling building died this winter. One of them right in the middle of the cold snap. You know, it was like 28, 26 below, and I get a call saying, the furnace has died, and we've had the Chief Mountain Gas up here, and they can't limp it along any longer. And then about 60 days later, just about 3 weeks ago, the big one in the back shop did the same thing.
Boy.
So we added $8,500 to cover a couple of large furnaces, which that work is done. I just told them to proceed with it. I mean, I'm not the nicest guy in the world. That's pretty heartless not to change the furnace in the recycling.
Great fix.
So
I needed a furnace too, Jeff.
yeah, you're on your own there, Councillor. Sorry. Other than that, there really isn't much. Again, tiny little tweaks here and there as we've got actuals. I don't have anything else of significance, although ask anything along the way, but I don't have anything of significance until page 7. It's the very end of operating. In the original budget we did, and I put this in my CAO report, we have to remediate the 4160 kV transformer at Powerhouse Hill, and it's full of PCBs. And not a little bit, but a lot of PCBs. And so that has to be very professionally remediated and taken care of in pieces. And we had an original quote of $60,000 to remediate it. There's a company, I think, out of BC that's come and looked it over, and they said they can do it all for $25 and get it out of there. So that's a significant decrease on those remediation costs. We budget.
Question, Jeff.
Sorry, Councillor.
Question on that remediation of that transformer.
Yeah.
What about the ground all around it that's leaked it?
Yeah.
PCBs has leaked into the ground.
Yeah, so
What are we doing with that?
that'll all be part of the remediation project.
You have to reclaim their land.
And that'll all get, I don't know how it's dealt with, I don't know the science, Councillor, but it's all part of their quote to remediate the site.
So that what do you call it, dugout is not in that exact area location.
I assume not, but I don't know for sure.
I sure hope it isn't.
Yeah, yeah. So that saved us some money. We do budget every year for PCB compliance. Our small transformers on the poles, we're slowly working those out. The older ones have PCBs, and so they can be remediated. So that's good. And then I wanted to talk for just a couple of things in capital. We haven't made many changes to capital. We tweaked when we knew our actuals on MSI and a few things like that. But one thing I did under Public Works Capital 232762 last week, 2 weeks ago, we talked about this attempting to conserve MSI. So we made the call to remove the mini backhoe. It was fully MSI funded for $110,000. It is something that has its application and is beneficial, but it's certainly something we can continue to do our work without. So it's one of those things that was nice to have, but certainly not critical. And so I made the decision to pull that out. And so that was under 232762. The other thing down in 272027, this is the Parks Capital. Now you remember we mitigated a bunch of these projects. We cut them back and tried to preserve as much of the Parks and Rec Reserve as we could in attempting to populate the Indoor Rec Facility Reserve. And one of the things we were gonna do is we knocked the stairs at Redford from 40 down to 10, and we've put it back to 40 simply because Dylan is planning on building them fully out of metal. And there'll be completely one-piece welded staircase there.
Wow.
And he didn't wanna throw 10,000, like good money after bad essentially.
Right.
Doing the 10,000 of just patching it for now. He thinks he can get it done. Now, if that causes us some real grief in our future conversation tonight, we'll deal with it. But he was wanting to get building and buying supplies so that he could weld all that up and get that going. So we put that back in. And other than that, that was really the only changes on capital. So there wasn't much there, Council.
Mayor?
Please go ahead.
So will Dylan do that in the off-season?
Yeah, we'll probably get everything in this year, buy all the supplies.
Be in this year's budget?
Yeah, correct.
But it won't be installed till probably next summer?
And my guess is it's a great November, December type of thing.
Okay.
Unless, I will qualify that, unless he wants to do it on site. So unless it makes better sense to build it
Yeah.
at the hill,
Okay,
then yeah, you might see it as a fall project.
okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Councillor Selk, go ahead.
Okay, Jeff, just a niggling question if I
Sure,
could.
yeah.
In the golf course capital, you've got a workman in there.
Oh, yeah, I should mention that, yes.
Didn't Alex buy one last year?
We did, and we had, our other one went completely dead this spring, not recoverable. And so I talked to Paul, and they went over everything, and they went over the condition of the mower we had in there, and they think that they can push that to 2024, 25. And the other thing I was frankly looking to do, Council, is I was looking to reduce capital expenses at the golf course. I mean, we're budgeting a $100,000 operating loss and a $95,000 capital spend at that facility, right now. And so we were able to pull, what was it, 40,000 out of there, if I recall? Yeah, we were able to pull 40,000 by replacing the workman and pushing them over to 2025 in this case. Miles seemed to feel that was their higher priority given the nature of the work they're doing. So I just have to trust him on that one. And it was 40 grand cheaper, so I didn't push back really hard.
Right. So you're putting it out of its misery.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I asked the exact same question, Councillor, when Paul came in. I said, I swear we just bought one of those. But I guess we've had multiple of those. And they carry the herbicide, they carry the sweepers, they carry, they have all kinds of attachments that go to them. And so they use them for those different variety of things. So,
Really
yes.
is a workman.
Thank you for bringing that up. That was on my list to talk about. Is there any other questions on that? I fully recognize, Council, we have a difficult hill to climb here on this reserve discussion, possibly maybe after we eat and get our blood sugars nice and healthy. But from the budget point of view, I'm hoping you find this as an acceptable budget.
I mean, you've done a lot of fine work on this budget.
Can I just ask a quick question too?
Go ahead.
Jeff, for the 2-92-830, the solar, I'm assuming that's just, it's paying for itself, but you have to reflect it in there
Tell me that account again, sorry, Councillor.
for loan repayment?
The 10,000 you have on the solar.
No, it's $230,946.
Where are you
Number?
looking at?
2-92-830.
Oh, it's back in operating though. Yes, sorry.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, so we
that's the one.
have the entire payment in one account, and then the revenue is actually made up of a couple of different accounts because there's some savings on our transmission and distribution. But yes, we do certainly have to show it because if there's no revenue there, taxes have to cover it.
Right, so
Yeah.
that answers my question.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Well,
right,
do you want to take a pause?
yeah, maybe we should pause for a few minutes, Councillor.
I'll move to recess for
Thank
15
you.
minutes.
All in favor? Thank you very much. I'm sorry, guys, we're going to it on your behalf. Thank you. I'm not so sure that I see Councillor Bengry. I'm not.
He's there.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, it's not feeling very well. Okay, so we need to go back to the reserves and now discuss the recreation.
Which paper are we looking at this time?
Well,
Question. Let me see.
I am not so 100% sure, but if you want to look at your paper that's called detailed reserve listing, maybe that'll be a good place to start. And
I just need to look at
does somebody want to start talking? So we have had a presentation. Yes, there is different document in your packet, different ideas. So now we need to decide what we're going to do. As we can see, there is 404. Now I lost the amount exactly. I think it's $412,000 somewhere that is from past reserves. And there is 260,000 from this year reserve, and the rest is actually unfunded. So if you have 412,000 and 260,000, that brings you to 612,000, leaving you short about 388, if my math is correct.
No, $672,398.
Oh, okay, all right, so it's
You
300.
tell me what pages you're on so I can follow along with this discussion?
Okay, Councillor, we are looking at the Parks and Rec reserves. And if you give me a minute, I'll tell you exactly where we're at.
4-10-268.
Right.
All right, I'm there.
Yeah, if I had added my math properly, 6 and 1 is 7. You're exactly right. I had written 260, but I counted as 200. That's when you don't have your glasses, huh?
I feel thrilled that I actually got one on the school teacher.
Good for you. So we precisely, thank you, have is a discussion, $1 million.
I was talking to, I mean, I know we can pull money from wherever we want, but I would like to hear Jeff's
Position.
idea as to where that money could come from, because he knows what's going to be happening, what money needs to be spent where. I'm not saying that we have to just, you know, if he brings that up, we don't have to decide that that's what we want to do, but I'd rather have him go through that and let us know kind of where that 327,602 is. So.
Okay, I appreciate that perspective. Thank you.
We could talk a lot all night long and not really get anywhere.
You know, all night long is a long night.
Wait, that's a Lionel Richie song.
Yeah, it is. I'm singing it right now, actually, as soon as she says it.
See?
We're going to be dancing on the sea.
I was just thinking that's.
All right, so
Yeah.
Jeff, please go ahead.
So I want to preface a couple of things before we get into that. I will tell you the moral of the story to your question is I actually tried to go through this exercise a bit today because I was worried you were going to ask me that very question. And I will suggest it's not obvious.
Okay.
Let's put it that way. It just isn't. And that's kind of where we stalled out a bit intentionally on my part last week that, you know, we said, okay, we got 412,000 and then plus 260 that we're taxing in 2021. Now, one of the things, let me throw a little cold water just to start. You are absolutely correct that between the $412,398 and the $260,000 we're taxing this year, you're at $672,398. That is correct. The current 2021 budget is intending to use $95,000 to fund recreation items in this year as well. Mm-hmm. So that takes away 95,000 of that unless we want to either remove those projects or change their funding. So we need to have some of that discussion too. All this kind of ties in, right? So, like I said, Council, it isn't obvious where this additional funding can come from, and I don't have a simple roadmap for you to work through this. It doesn't seem like in a reserve balance of $4+ million, it'd be tough to find 10% of it. But it is, because it's been allocated to things. Some of it's simple in-year budget or next year budget carryover. Some of it is for planning for future things. So I'll give you an example. The very first line of the reserve listing is council approved capital. It's $100,000. That's kind of a low-hanging fruit, if I could be honest. It's $100,000 that you as a council have asked, or the previous councils have asked, is kept at your discretion every year for capital projects that may come up in the year. So there's $100,000. My caution around that, if I could give one, is we tend to have something that comes up every year where we have to use it, at least a part of it. And if you use it all this year and you wish to get it back next year to have $100,000, you got to tax for that $100,000. That's the challenge with it, right? So everything's got kind of this domino effect to it, that you can kick that can down the road if you'd like, a year. But at some point, if you wish to get that back, and I would strongly suggest you do, we use that. We have the first time we ever used it was this back parking lot. This water line just blew out in the middle of winter and we had an ice rink. And it was $70,000 to fix it.
Yeah.
And so we had council approved capital. So it's there. It also could be that you don't move it out of that reserve account, but you consider it in your total number if we get to that point. Based on what the prior, there's just a lot of ways to go about that. I just give that as an example. When I did my exercise today, I was trying to decide how much of that I could take out. But if you think I can predict the nature of the issue that may come up between now and December 31st, then you have far too high of an opinion of me. And so that's kind of the challenges. There's little things like directional signage for $25,000, entrance signage. It's not the end of the world if that goes somewhere else for a time. And we all recognize that this potentially is just for a time, right? It's giving this group a fair shot at moving ahead with their fundraising with something in hand, right? But what we don't know is the end scale of the facility that may or may not be built. We don't know any of that yet, right? So this is really giving them some confidence and a fair shot to go raise money. So you may be temporarily allocating other funds for a time until we know what it is we're grappling with next March.
Councillor Selk.
Hey, Jeff, I got to ask a couple of hypothetical things, if you don't mind, okay?
Nope.
I'm looking at your capital budget, and I'm sort of recognizing what the mayor suggested with respect to the MSI funds are kind of a sacred cow, so to speak, right? Because our original thought was, well, let's take it out of MSI, and the mayor's sort of thinking, well, let's be cautious about that because we want to use what we've accumulated to fix things going forward, to kind of level that out. Am I putting words in your mouth, Mayor?
No, I think it's pretty accurate.
So we want to kind of keep that. But the other elephant that we have in this room that we all sort of begrudgingly acknowledge is the wastewater treatment plant, right? So I guess my question, Jeff, is where are we at with applying for grant funding? Do we have to supply 1/3 this year? And yeah, like, is there some leverage there that we can say, all right, you know, we're not going to put 1.1 million in reserve this year for the wastewater treatment plant. We're going to use the whatever we need here to adjust it to there so that we come to the million and then we go forward. Like, help me out with the grant funding formulas and where we're going with that. And
No, fair question. So maybe a thought or a comment before I get it closely. I understand that we have two major projects trying to come to funding at the same time. And so that's difficult because really it could be up to more than 50% of our total reserves just to realize both of these projects, our portion, right? It could be huge. What I've heard this for a few months now, and what I hadn't considered going into this really is that I'd never viewed them as competing for the same pot of funds. I fully recognize how they can, by the way. I just had said, okay, we have major utility capital. If we were considering starting from scratch and considering this rec facility today, and I came to you as council and said, are you guys open to using major utility capital for the rec facility? My guess is there'd be kind of this level of discomfort with that idea because, you know, of what it was intended for. So I hadn't really considered that we were going to be looking to that funding, and it could kind of stand on its own to some degree. You know, there's 1.13 million or something in there, and that's for that purpose, and the twain weren't going to meet. But that's obviously maybe not completely accurate. So we have applied for the Alberta Water Wastewater Grant for the plant for 50 cent dollars. Remind me, you just talked to them recently, Hawken, if you don't mind, Mayor.
No, please go ahead.
What was the discussion there?
Well, they're just asking for more information, like, I can't say anything about the status of the application or
Right.
anything.
Do you recall the timing of it, though? Or is it just on a demand basis as needed?
They sort of indicated that it would be between May and June sometime that we would find out.
Yeah. Okay. So we used a number of 3.3 in that application. So we'd be looking at 1.65. Now that's if the project, and we think it's going to come in south of that when we actually get to tender with it, based on some of the other conversations and some of the other work that they've been doing with some other partners. But let's say it's 3, just for easy math here. Let's say it comes in at 3. We could use 1.5 from the province. We have 1.113 in right now, so we'd be roughly, was that $400,000 we'd still got to find from somewhere.
So it's short still?
Yeah, and again, it hasn't been to tender, so we're just using a hypothetical right now.
Okay, so you're taking the high bar.
I'm taking kind of in the middle.
The middle
we've
bar.
heard 2.8 to 3.3 from 2 different consultants at this point. And so if it's just around 3, yeah, we've still got a shortfall of about 400. Now, I have Curtis actually and Wade coming to CCW next week to talk about the nature of the issues with the plant right now and what's happening, give you some more context into what they're grappling with right now at the plant. And so that'll be good for some context. And their position would be if we could start on Friday, that would be great. My position is we have a complex engineering and tendering process we got to get through here. And again, it's another thing that hasn't been obvious exactly how we get that done. But we're working through that. We're getting there. We've met with 3 different firms and trying to get an idea of how the best way to tender this so that we get the best level of accountability for the town. So for example, what we don't want to do is have an engineer design this project and spec all the equipment. We go out and buy the equipment and then hire some guys to start putting it together. If it doesn't function right, who are we going after? Who is it that's responsible? So we're trying to find this balance where we've got the one point of accountability if there's problems with the performance of this, because remember, in the performance of a sewer plant, there isn't really a margin for error.
No.
It's either performing or it's not, because the thing runs 365, 24/7, and you have to continually put that effluent in the river. You can't set it aside till you treat it right and then put it in the river. It just goes straight to the river. So we want to make sure that we have good accountability and a place to look at. Now, I know I've gone a long way around, Councillor. If this project, well, there's a couple things I think might be what you're getting at. So we're taxing $260,000 this year that was to go towards the Rec Master Plan priorities, but we scaled those priorities way back to free up a bunch of that cash to help go into this, get this number bigger. You will be doing the same thing again next year. So there's another $250,000 planned to be taxed in 2022 for the same purpose. So there's a part of me that says the goal here might be 750. Because in 2022, you've just taxed for another 250 that would get it to that number. But what it doesn't do for you in particular is it doesn't say that we've got $1 million set aside in May of 2021. It doesn't, and I get that. So that doesn't mean you can't, well, I want to carefully word this because I all of a sudden felt this visceral, I don't support what I'm about to say, but it doesn't mean that you can't take it from another reserve and replenish it next in 2022 with that money you're taxing for recreation. Right? You could feasibly do that. We'd all just have to make our best guess for the need of that money between now and the end of the year. And depending on the reserve, there may be very low risk of that.
Okay. Councillor Selk.
Okay, I guess what I'm also getting at, Jeff, is that the only grant funding we can apply for? Is there other grant funds
sure.
available? Is there federal grant funding? Is there provincial grant funding?
Yeah.
Is there, and the other part of this it's like, we have a lot of open-ended questions about the rec facility, but we also do about the wastewater treatment plant, because we don't know if the blood tribe's coming on board, and what sort of things they can tap into from the federal level that will give them money to put towards this. So those are open-ended questions that I have, I guess, a little bit of discomfort with just saying, yeah, we got to do 1.1 million from our own pocket, as opposed to, well, let's do 700,000 from our own pocket.
I get it. I totally get it. My hope, and again, we haven't been able to have this meeting yet, but if we have, say, for example, the blood tribe, that's making up that $400,000 gap potentially, or something like that. The Alberta Water Wastewater, and Hawken, again, I'll turn to you. Is that one a Fed provincial split, like some of those are? Do you know?
You just got to come up with the remaining grants from. You can use other provincial funds for it. It's an Alberta program.
Okay, it's just straight Alberta, because some of those, like when we did the outfall line, it was a split between the feds and the province, and then the town made up the rest.
I think it's provincial.
Okay.
I don't know where they get their money, but like, I think it's administered through the province.
Yeah, okay. And agree, Councillor, we've done some homework into that, and we'll continue to do that, because we've contacted the MP's office and asked if he can have people in Ottawa give us an idea of federal funding that may be available. So we've reached out to some of those groups. So all that's in the works. So the next stage for the sewer project to try and close some of those gaps is tendering for a hard price.
Okay, because I guess where I'm going with this is that I really struggle with the fact that we were okay with everything right up until the wastewater treatment plant landed on our lap. You know, we were cool with everything going forward with the rec center, and then this elephant came in the room, right? So I just would like to know that there's opportunities for us to explore every grant, every additional amount of funding we can get without using our taxpayers' dollars first, because that's a big ticket item.
Yeah, no question.
And I gotta think that there's something else out there. The other question I need to ask, and this is, and maybe Curtis and Wade can provide context around this. You said the reason we're replacing this is because we can't get parts anymore.
It's part of the reason, yeah. So we've got two major, well, I shouldn't even limit it to two, but two that I'm aware of right now. There's two issues. One is the frequency of the breakdowns. So we had another one today, for example. Curtis actually wanted me to see if you'd all go up to the sewer plant tonight to see what he's dealing with. Told him we'd just deal with his presentation next week. So what's happening is those RBCs, the core components, are failing, and pretty rapidly. So Curtis's position is, when he started with the town, they figured they had enough replacement parts for all the components of the RBCs to last until Curtis retired. At the frequency they were replacing them, they're out. So we're manufacturing and we're making and we're putting things together. They burn through, they're having like a break a week right now in the last couple of months probably. And the problem is, if we get simultaneous breaks on each side of the RBC banks, we don't have enough treatment. We will not meet our requirements from Alberta Environment and the levels of treatment. So we've been really lucky that one side might have a break, we move everything to the other side, we repair, we turn them both back on. One side has one break, we move everything to the other side, we repair. So that's part of it. The frequency of the breakdown has become greatly accelerated. And the other part is, and this is something I don't have the report back yet, you might remember we talked about this receiving water study. And so that was a study that we were required to do. Alberta Environment said you must do this because we want to analyze what you're putting back in the river. And if you're meeting your treatment requirements, or your nitrogen and phosphorus levels, everything. And we have some issues in some of those levels. We're okay, we're compliant, but there is some concern about our ability to treat out some of that stuff. And so there's a recommendation there. I think we'll likely see from the province, we don't have it back yet, that they recommend we go to what's called this MBBR system and get away from what's called an RBC system. The RBC systems, there's not many of them left. We're one of the last.
So, having said that, I'm getting to my question. They're having a hard time getting parts. Is that what it is?
Yeah, so there's a cost involved, and then just the being down is a huge issue, right?
So they can't get the parts at all, or?
They're having them manufactured. So they're having them custom made from a manufacturing place that does steel works, I think out of Fort McLeod, I think is what he told me.
Okay. So they can manufacture them, the parts that they need.
They have been, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
There is nothing that they can't get, period.
I don't want to answer that conclusively. I'd feel better if Curtis could answer that.
Because there are fabricators from Fort McLeod to Fort McMurray,
Yep.
so.
Yep.
I would think in this province where we fabricate everything for the oil patch, we can fabricate something for a wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah, it's important to remember we've got components in a humid and acidic and difficult environment that, all of those motors and gear drives and axles and all those are seeing some issues too. And that's what's causing, if I understand it correctly, Curtis may tell you a totally different story next week and he'd be right. But I think what part of it is those axles, they get torqued just a little bit, they get just off kilter, and it starts to put this incredible pressure on the RBCs. Because those RBCs weigh thousands of pounds when they're loaded with bacteria. And so they start to torque funny and they start to twist a bit and then they start to really bend everything. But I guess for me, Councillor, it does go back to, I'm surprised that you as a group honestly would be considering using major utility capital reserves for the rec facility. I've never considered that those two things were in conflict, aside from them both needing a ton of money.
Okay.
Right? So they're competing for scarce resources, certainly.
Councillor Bengry, go ahead.
I apologize for not being there. I don't enjoy doing council like this, but nevertheless, Councillor Selk, you're hitting on a very difficult position for any council to decide. I look at the fact that we're what, 6 months away from an election, and if we start using our capital reserves in all the departments, utilities, recreation, whatever, where does it put an incoming council position for their budget negotiations? And where does it put them in a position when they do their
Strategic planning.
yes,
That's what-
strategic planning? And I'm saying we need to be very cautious, because I don't want, if I don't go back on council, I don't want to leave a legacy that was the council that I was on that spent money that should have been used in something else. And I'm very, very concerned that other council thinking is not going to be a lot like ours, because other council people come in and they have things that they want to accomplish on council. I think we need to move very cautiously forward. As I listen to Jeff in our water treatment plant, that's a very serious thing. And we start throwing money into having people manufacture things for us, and how long those manufactured things really work when they're not set up into a jig and precisely built and so forth. But furthermore, if we had a major breakdown, can somebody manufacture fast enough to provide the services that we need, so that we're in line also with environment and so forth. So I would caution us, the council, that we need to look very, very seriously at the forest through the trees. What's coming in for the next council? What are they going to have to operate on? What are they going to have to do? And that's just my thoughts.
All right. So thank you, Councillor Bengry. Councillor Barnes, do you have some thought regarding the matter of using utility money towards the reserve for Parks and Rec?
I do. I'm very concerned that we don't take that operations funding and put it into the Rex facility. I'm having a very difficult time. I've seen all kinds of wrecks. I mean, my business is real estate. I've seen all kinds of things happen in homes. You know, I get phone calls. Well, geez, I just bought this house last year, and all of a sudden I've got a $35,000 repair on this and that, and holy mackerel, you know. And inspections do reports on these facilities, and it's only a guess. It's a guesswork what might happen down the road. And boy, I'll tell you, if we have a breakdown at that sewer treatment plant, like Councillor Bengry said, with fabricated stuff that's not built to specs, we're in a pickle, a big pickle. And I had a concerned citizen come to my office today about it. And when I think of what's going on in the sewer treatment plant and what we have to do up there to clean all the waste, and oh my goodness, I just can't imagine what would happen if we had a breakdown and do things. We have, pardon me, we don't have the same type of government that they have down east, where they allow people to pour sewage directly into a river. That would be an awful situation, but we'd be perhaps put in a situation like that, but it would be nasty. So I'm having a very difficult time.
Environment would not allow you to do that.
No, they wouldn't.
They would force you to truck the stuff down to the river.
Yep, that's right. And then that's a big expense. So
yeah,
I'm very concerned. The timing is just not good. And with all the cutbacks that we're having, you know, it's just the only other option, if we do take that money out and we have a breakdown, then we're going to have to do a debenture. We're going to have to borrow. And then we have to tax for it. So 6 of one, half dozen the other.
Yeah, but to borrow when you have the money in reserve doesn't seem to make quite sense either.
No, I know. But if we take that reserve money, Mayor, and we put it into that facility, and then we have a breakdown, where's the money going to come to do the repair? Because you cannot let it go. It has to be done. Where's that money going to come from?
Yeah, but, okay. What I was trying to say is if you have reserves right now, maybe not the time to pull them out. Councillor Brown. Go ahead.
I have a Jeff question.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't think there's anyone sitting at this table and on the screen that feels like, I think we would all, absolutely, we want water, we want sewer. I don't think anyone here is saying it's not important and it doesn't need to be done. I could be wrong, but I feel like all of us need to flush the toilet and get a drink of water, right? It's like all of these are important to our community and they are hugely expensive, absolutely. And bravo to previous councils and this council for having money set aside for that. I think that's brilliant and I'm in huge support of that. I guess my question is this. So if you can just stick with me here. So when we when we did the soccer park,
Yeah.
we had, you know, our $75,000 from the Simpson brothers, who was fantastic. And then we just kind of steamrolled that into federal grants and other grants and asking for money within the communities, the county, the town of Cardston. And that's how we got our in-kind and all of that. That's how that soccer park came to be. So I guess my question is, so when previously we asked in a motion stating that we had $1 million to be set aside so that the Pickleball Association could in fact have a reassurance to go to their people that are wanting to give money. And the mayor, you've actually brought this up, so it's a valid question. So can we not, I'm struggling with, so the mayor suggested to a letter to us, an email that she sent us, and correct me if I'm wrong, could we not take some of it in cash and some of it in kind? And between the two, it's worth about $1 million, between the in-kind and the cash. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I when I read that and everything else that was in there, I struggled with, you know, is that bait and switch? Are we promising one thing and delivering another? Because I struggle with that. But so I guess my question 4 hours later is that appropriate to do? Can we say we have $600 whatever $1,000 and we have money in kind, in land, in whatever? Like, is that real? Is that something that we can do? Is it feasible? Is it honest?
Oh, so the last question is probably that's a heavy one.
Sorry.
Because it's a really heavy one, right? Because I don't think, so these resolutions to try and get to this $1 million have been intentions of council to try and get $1 million set aside for this group to go fundraise.
Correct.
But there are fiscal realities around that too. It doesn't make you dishonest to recognize those. Let's put it that way. And you also have like 3,800 and some other people in the community that are asking you to consider this just as heavily.
Correct.
Right? So I don't know if it's a question. I don't know if that's the right question to me. Like, now, do I think you can add in-kind, land values, site prep and stuff to the $1 million? Sure, you can also tell them you've got $500,000 set aside and that's what you have. Like, I don't think, I know it's not your preference, particularly Councillor Selk or Court, but I'm just saying, I don't think you've been dishonest to say, hey guys, we've gone through everything as much as we can. We got $600,000. Go match it. And if you do it, let's talk again. Right? I'm still very nervous about this whole thing and the fact that if we put $1 million up and they somehow raise over $1 million, we've just agreed to build something with no knowledge of its operations or costs.
Exactly.
That's one of my big concerns, right? Is that we've said, oh, I guess you raised the money, so we're committed now. But I don't even know if that's the responsible thing to do, because we don't have any idea of the operational costs. Even the pickleball group is assuming it's $150,000 a year loss. That's considerable for us. So I've been frustrated, as you all know, by this process from the beginning, because we decided that we wanted this building and now we're scrambling like heck to justify its existence. So it's a weird way to approach it. We didn't say, here's a need, how do we satisfy the need? We said, here's a building and let's justify its existence. And that's a tough thing to do, because we haven't looked at what those costs are going to be to keep this thing going forever. So that's a difficult position for you guys as a council to be in, I think. Because what if we put $1 million aside, and what if they raise it in a year? What's the expectation of everyone on the other side of this discussion? It's nothing short of we're spending $2 million on a facility right away, and you're running it forever without any question.
But can I just...
Please go ahead.
But wouldn't that be up to... So my understanding as a councillor was that we agreed to put the $1 million set aside for 1 year, in which giving the Pickleballers Association the opportunity to come up with money for the building. And if in fact it wasn't, that money would go back and it would still be brought to the next council, whoever is sitting at this table, come next term, and they would then decide on size, where, how much, all of that. Like, I didn't feel like us just putting this $1 million setting aside just meant game on.
Sure.
Like, that wasn't my perspective when I voted. I don't know about the rest of you, but I felt like putting the money set aside was showing that we had, because I understand it's the chicken before the egg scenario. I get it. But at no point did I assume putting the $1 million set aside was game on.
Sure. I'm just asking you to consider what the other side of that thinks. So they've got pledges or cash to match that. And then the next council says, sorry guys, we're taking half of it back. Again, just to imagine that scenario, right? Which I hope wouldn't happen for that. That's no good. So I having talked to some of the folks, that's what I interpret as this is on. As long as we raise the money. And the other question I think it begs too is, well, I understand that $1 million is a nice round number. Why $1 million?
Yeah. Exactly.
You know, we don't know what the amount, we don't know the cost of the building, or what it'll even be. I mean, we have some idea, we have some concept, which is good. It gave us kind of some guidance that is at 2.1 or 2.4, you know, and that's good. But you know, it's a reasonably arbitrary number.
Okay.
So I think you have to ask yourself that. I just go back to, for me, at the end of the day, if you as a council say, hey, we're going to take $300,000 out of major utility capital reserves, for example, I'm not proposing this, by the way, but you say we're going to take $300,000 out of major utility capital. Jeff, you go get the tendering on the sewer plant, and you got to find the $300,000 somewhere. And if that means we got to go borrow next year, that's what the next council can decide. That's what you can do. That sits around this table. I just never imagined you were using major utility capital money. I never did think that. That's all I've been surprised by a little bit.
All right.
Thank you.
Councillor Drew, how do you feel about it?
Well, I mean, we need to find that money from somewhere.
Do you feel obligated to find it? That's a question.
Well, we made a motion to have $1 million set aside, right? And if it's land and kind, I guess that's something that we would have to decide. I'm just concerned about expectations, what we're thinking we're going to build. Have some numbers out there, but I don't know that the money that we would have, even if the Pickleball Association was able to raise their side, would we be able to build that facility for $2 million, right?
The other question that I may have then is that when Dr. Clark spoke with me and with Jeff, it doesn't seem like the project that he's talking about is the same kind of project that we talked about when Gib presented the project. It didn't sound at all like the same project. So that is another thing that I feel, unless we really understand properly what is the partnership that he was talking about, what it was that he wanted to look at, I feel it's difficult to make decisions without knowing the facts, as you said. For me, I do not want to see utilities that are a major priority be robbed of money to deal with something that is not yet a reality that we can approve because we don't know the facts. So I'd rather go with what I know, which is we need a sewer plant replacement. That I know we do need. And I agree that we have pledged $1 million, but we did not pledge the source of it. The motion is open-ended. Therefore, as you were saying, it could well be cash and in kind. And there is nothing wrong with cash and in kind. The fact is you still need engineering costs, you still need to have preparation costs, you still need all sorts of other costs that are associated with the building of something. So when you ask, is that dishonest? I don't feel it's dishonest. I think what it is coming to the reality and be able to say, you know what? With all the best will on earth, the only way to do it is to give you assurance of a total of $1 million that is cash and in kind. That's the way I would prefer to see it. I know it's not the way that all of you would like to see it, but I think that's what we have to make for decision. Otherwise, it's almost 8 o'clock and we have still a lot to go ahead. Go ahead, Councillor Selk.
Well, first of all, we made a motion and it passed 7-0 that we would set the $1 million aside. So I'm pretty sure from the fundraiser's perspective, it's like, well, now you're walking back from what you agreed to. Now, having said that, I don't know that we need to hammer this out tonight, Mayor, because we don't have Councillor Court here either. So I would suggest that we don't have to nail down everything tonight.
Well, I appreciate that, if that is your opinion. The only trouble is, if this is not going to affect the way we do the budget, then the finance department needs to have our sense of what we intend to do with that budget. Because I have to set the mill rate. Mm-hmm. And it is really not the preferable thing to do it so fast that we cannot make a decision. Right now, from what I can see, we can decide on a reserve or not, but if we don't, administration cannot set the mill rate. And it creates a backlog of difficulty for the administration, who then has to work themselves silly to get the tax notice out, and it's not fair.
So if we agree that we're going to take it from reserve, and we're not going to take it from any of the budget, they should be able to go forward.
Yeah, correct.
Is that?
Yeah, if it's all coming from different reserves, that won't affect the budget.
Right. So you could set.
Correct.
Yeah, you could set the mill rate, do whatever.
That's right.
So in other words, what you're proposing, Councillor, is to take it out from reserve wherever that is.
Yeah, I mean, Councillor Court isn't here, but I would assume that that's where we kind of talked about going in that direction when we talked about the $1 million.
Okay, so would you be okay with that, Councillor Brown?
Sorry, I just want to be clear here.
Yes.
So we would not take it out of our major utilities. Is that what you're saying?
You could,
No,
because it's a reserve account.
That's in reserve.
Yeah.
Like I'm talking reserve, the whole.
So count anything on this document.
Yes.
If you simply come to the million using the numbers in here, it will not affect the 2021 budget.
Yeah, and they can go ahead and do.
And then we can draft a mill rate bylaw. But
Okay,
if you
so
wish
help me-
if you wish to change or tax more for it to get to the million, or take out projects in the budget, then it does affect it.
Yeah.
But if it's simply coming out of reserves, it won't affect the budget.
And you would prefer that?
Well, we don't need to get into all my preferences on the matter, but yeah, what it would be is it would allow us to bring you a draft mill rate bylaw at CCW next week to look and see what this looks like.
Okay.
Because you need to pass it the following council meeting.
So then my answer would be yes.
Okay. Councillor Selk?
Right. I think and I think Councillor Drew alluded to this, is we're going to take the $1 million out of reserves.
Somewhere, yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
And
Is it?
at the end of the day, all we're really doing is we're saying, you know, if we have to look for dollars in the couch, we're gonna find them somewhere, and let these guys have a letter that they can actually hang their hat on and go fundraise. Now, I know that there's lots of things that administration's uncomfortable with. My only comment would be, yeah, we don't know the ongoing costs, yeah, we don't know the location, yeah, we don't know the size, but we got a pretty good idea. So I guess my suggestion to Jeff would be, if you take into consideration that it's a 19,000 square foot building, it's going to be built wherever, what, you know, we'll say in the downtown core, can you then go and have your recreation guys go figure out the ongoing costs, go figure out the ongoing, because you've had this sort of, you've had this whatever perspective
Yeah.
for a few months now. Can they take that and run with it? And just give us an idea.
Well, and I think, if I might, I think like we've talked, I think there is kind of an idea. It's a difficult thing, right? Because we don't know what's totally in it. And there's just a lot of that. We've started working on some scenarios. If we open it 12 hours a day, here's what the shifts would be. You know, we got to figure all that out. So we've been working on scenarios from, 12 to 16 hours a day, number of staffing per area. So we've started to try and mock some of that up, but it is, let's call it conceptual at best.
Can I ask a question then? Councillor Selk, help me understand that. The concept of Dr. Clark, who is the president of the Pickleball Association, when he spoke with me, was something between 8,000 and 9,000 square feet. How are we back at 19,000 square feet? Who is a spokesperson for that association? I am confused. Help me.
Well, you need to help me. When did he talk to you, and when did he suggest that size?
Well, it was before he came and did the presentation there. He said that the 19,000 square feet was not realistic, and realized it, and he talked about a much smaller building when he spoke with me.
Okay, well, that's...
And I do not know, Jeff, if Dr. Clark spoke with you regarding the ideas of the rec center. Please help us.
Yeah, he and I spoke mostly around, we talked a lot about, are there partnership opportunities in the community to partner with other existing entities that have other infrastructure? And we were kind of exploring down that road, and we left it a bit open-ended. He actually had to go. He was literally leaving the country when we talked, but we spent about a half hour, 40 minutes just talking about, do we, and I think he went and visited, the night before he met with me, he had talked with Delbert Beezer on the golf course, and he just wants to at least see what that looks like. So things like the golf course or the Selk purse or the LDS churches or whatever that is, right? At least we've started to do some exploration into those. So we've met with the FM group, for example, from the LDS churches. We've talked with the golf course guys about what would that square footage look like, just to get an idea of what would that be. Because at the end of the day, with $2 million, that might be all the square footage we could, if we had $2 million, but that might be all the square footage we could build anyway. We've been looking at other facilities out there too. I mentioned one earlier that Red Deer just opened a really nice 20,000 square foot indoor dry land facility. So they're sending us some information and trying to help us understand their construction costs and their ongoing operations. And so we're trying to get a feel for some real life, real world things that just finished in 2019. The construction just finished. So it's new and it's kind of neat looking. But my conversation with Dr. Clark was more, are there potential opportunities to explore in partnerships, and who might that be, and then should we start approaching them? That was our conversation.
Well, those are important steps that do not tell me that it's a 19,000 square foot we're looking at.
Yeah.
Councillor Selk?
Can we just table this whole conversation, please? Because
well, I don't know if we want to table it. If you feel you want to table it, it's fine.
Well, I think this information that you just provided, that, well, Dr. Clark's speaking, and I'm not, okay, well, that came out of left field.
Well, I don't know if it came up of left field, but that's a conversation we had on the phone.
Well,
I can tell you it was.
then I guess my suggestion is that Dr. Clark's speaking on behalf of himself, but he's not the one that's in charge of the fundraising. It's Brad Beezer.
Well, did you meet with Brad Beezer, Jeff?
We just had a phone call, very preliminary.
Preliminary.
Yeah,
Okay.
Brad was wondering if I could give him the letter for the $1 million, and I told him we had some work to do still. I couldn't give him that letter just yet.
Okay. Go ahead.
Councillor Bengry and
Councillor
Councillor Barnes
Bengry.
had both had their hands up.
Thank you. Councillor Bengry, go ahead.
Councillor Selk, I agree with you right now. Maybe we need to table this conversation. I feel, as a council, that we're putting a very undue stress on our administration when we don't have all of the facts. And now we're going back into the history of this thing, and we're starting all over again. Let's get beyond that point. Let's give our administration the size of building we need, what needs to be in it, what's it going to be used for, and where's the money coming from, and where's the money coming from in the overall operation and billing of the facility in the future. Do we tax 2% just for a recreation center on a yearly basis? Whatever. We're asking our administration to open up the Golden Globe and come up with figures and facts for us when we don't even know what we want.
Yeah, but Councillor, the issue here is that administration needs to set a mill rate. So what I need to know, essentially, is if we are willing to get the rec center $1 million out of the reserves or not. Or is it going to be $650,000 or $700,000 out of the reserve plus in kind? Essentially, that's what I need to know so that I can crunch the figures. Councillor Barnes?
I like the in kind and taking the 600+ thousand and use in kind. In kind donations have been used in lots of projects. It is an actual monetary value, and I don't see there's a problem with that. That's my feeling.
Okay. So,
Need a motion to extend for an hour.
okay,
Make that
Councillor
motion to
Drew.
extend till 9 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. So essentially what we need to know, do we take all the money, the $1 million, out of the reserve, or is that 700,000 or whatever that is, plus in kind?
Well, if I might, Mayor, for my purposes, you've approved the budget. And so if we don't create a mill rate on that budget, you only have the option of manipulating reserves from then on, right? That's your option.
So, but this is why, if there is a component that is in kind, so
But
how...
it doesn't affect the budget.
Right, exactly.
So it's fine.
So in other words, so how should the motion be
You don't need one
worded?
right now.
You don't need one
We've already
motion right
passed the
now.
budget.
Right. That's what I'm getting at, is that
Yeah.
all we're
We can
bickering
wait
about
for
here
it.
is the reserves and how we're
Right.
gonna, so,
So we can
for all
do that.
intents and purposes, next week, we could pass a mill rate budget, because
Okay.
we're not gonna change anything based upon the budget.
Correct.
It's fair enough.
But why
So
can't we just stop talking about this for tonight and
Well-
wait a week?
It's important, and I'm glad we had those discussions no matter what.
Okay, so we'll bring you a mill rate budget, a mill rate bylaw based on the budget you passed tonight. You understand going forward now your options for getting to your end here are living within the reserves document. They're not in the budget.
Correct.
Right.
Okay,
I think that's what we intended all along.
that's fine.
Go,
Ask one question. So Councillor Selk talked about the expectation, well, and so did Jeff, talked about the expectation of the other side with the $1 million. Do we need some type of a memorandum of understanding with them to just say, you know, like we're planning on doing this, but when the time comes, we have to look at building size, costs of materials,
Right.
all that kind of stuff, so that they know that there's a, like, we have a contingency to say,
Yes.
I don't know.
You always got an out, eh?
Right?
Yeah,
If
I
I may,
agree.
Mayor?
And that's something that you always spoke about, Councillor Selk.
Yeah, I guess what I would suggest, Jeff, is that bring Brad into your office, sit him down and say, listen, what does this need to look like, you know? Does it need to look like $1 million cash?
Okay.
You know, or do you think we're walking back from our commitment if part of this is in kind?
Okay.
And the other thing that needs to happen with this group is we need to tell them, and you need to be part of the discussion on the ongoing costs,
Yeah.
because we want you to help
Yeah.
with that.
I think too, if I might, Councillor Selk, to your question, that's something that when we write the letter, that's, I mean, we'd give them one for the fundraising purposes. They don't need all that in the fundraising letter, but I think there's a more wholesome, fulsome letter saying, hey, here's what we landed on and here's how we see this going forward.
Because by doing that, it would stop. I mean, I believe you, Mayor, when you say you were told X amount of
Yeah.
square feet. I believe that. But we all need to be speaking the same language.
Yeah.
So that, because right now it sounds like we're not. We're hearing this and that, and no, let's have this. And the council's expectation is no more than this. Because if it's ever so much growing, that's terrifying for the taxpayer and everyone sitting at this table. So I really like the idea, Councillor.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, no, we can follow up with all that.
I can
And I
make one
really
more.
honestly believe if Dr. Clark wants to look at other options of working with somebody else, all those options should really be open, and we should encourage options.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
I had a discussion with Dr. Clark. He phoned me up to get me on, try and get me on board. And at no point in time was he in support of the building. He told me himself, you know, 9 to 16,000 square foot. He just thought the 19,000 square foot was very.
Okay, so we had similar discussions then. All right, so your ranch was much bigger.
Okay, just to be clear, Lloyd is not in charge of the fundraisers. Brad is. So the conversation needs to be had with Brad.
Yeah, but regardless.
Lloyd has his idea, and I think everybody else has their idea, so.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's the council that has to
Yep.
pay the piper.
Yeah, and this is just giving us all a headache.
So, right.
Okay.
Exactly. Let's move on.
Thank you.
6B, thank you to you too.
Okay, thanks, man.
Draft bylaws 1697, thank you, Håkan, it's been a long night. You earn your money tonight. So the intermunicipal development plan, Jeff, there is a document there, and I see they made the changes we suggested. There is one element that is disturbing to me still, and I don't especially go along with it very well, is a new redrafted map of the fringe area.
Yep.
And that is a problem for me because we are considered now as McGrath. They have their issues, we have ours. And at the end of the day, we shouldn't be considered the same way because the ICF was negotiated separately on the basis of each municipality having their own needs. So the per capita, for example, for the rec facilities is not the same formula for McGrath or for the town. So why are we considered all of a sudden the same?
You asking me that?
Well, you have
I
more.
was gonna say, well.
Yeah, you have more contact with the administration than we do.
So for me, just my administrative perspective on this is all the little green highlighted pieces of text through the thing I think are fine.
Yes, fine.
Administratively, I have no concern with them. They tidied up a couple of things and that's fine. I think we're really just down to the CFO exclusion area. Where I philosophically struggle with this change is nobody within the previous CFO exclusion area took any exception or made any comment to have it changed.
Yep.
Why?
Yep.
They were informed, they were sent a letter specifically to their box, they were given a time they could comment, they did not comment. And so now there's some rationale for a change. And I know it hinges because we changed it a little in McGrath and we wanted to do the same. I also take some exception, although it's complicated, but I take some exception to if we're considering the people that live there today, it's not good policy to build these kinds of policy documents on who lives there today. Because they might not live there tomorrow.
Yep.
And so maybe Mr. Jensen or Mr. Vandy doesn't want a CFO, so there's no harm in allowing it. But what if the next guy does?
Okay, so essentially, Councillor Selk, I think possibly what we need is a letter to the county and to the planning commission to explain to them that honestly, those changes are not agreeable with us.
If I might, Mayor, I'm with you. I have a hard time with the cookie cutter approach to this that, well, we're doing this with McGrath, so we're going to cookie cutter that in Cardston. It's like, no, we're two different communities. We don't want that.
It was the way the ICF was intended to be negotiated.
Yep.
So can somebody make a recommendation to have administration?
A resolution, not a recommendation.
Yeah, of course, sorry. It's getting late. Councillor Selk?
I make a motion that administration draft a letter to the county outlining our concerns with respect to changing the boundaries of what we had previously agreed. Anyway, Jeff, you know what I'm getting at.
Okay.
The boundaries we previously agreed to in the IMDP.
Yeah. Got it.
All right.
Okay.
Thank
Are we
you.
talking about going back to the original then?
We want to go back to the approved document
Right.
that was done by the Old Man River Commission when we saw it first.
You had mutually agreed at our last meeting to move back 1/4 section to the west.
Yeah.
Right.
And we had agreed to a change, to a move at about 1/4 section to the west.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was as much as we agreed, and the county was agreeable with us at the time. And all of a sudden, we saw two of their councillors come to a meeting and to the public hearing and giving us a totally new approach without any warning, which was rather interesting.
Well, it was a what-if scenario, and I don't like that at all.
Yeah, well, neither did we.
They're using a scalpel as opposed to a straight line to cut out the
Yeah.
boundary.
I will
Okay.
send a letter.
Thank you.
Oh, did you vote on it? Sorry?
All in
I don't
favor?
think you did. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So under 7A, accessible housing. I know, Councillor Selk, that was something that you were interested in, and I had said go to FCSS and kind of pitch the ideas. So do you want to go ahead and maybe between the two of you help us?
Perfect. We'll tag team it. And we're going to be super fast. Okay, so you requested I take this to FCSS. I took it to FCSS. They unanimously supported the idea of having affordable housing. Now, there's a booklet. One of the rec conferences I went to. They talk a lot about creating healthy communities, and so at FCSS, when I presented Councillor Selk's homework that he did, it was just in regards to in other areas, and he'll go into it more. What does it look like? How did it help their downtown? How did it help the seniors in their community? What's working, what's not working? Jeff had presented some questions. Does council wish to pursue accessible housing? How is the need to be determined? And what are the funding considerations essentially from our taxpayers? So great, valid questions. FCSS, my understanding from those that voted, it was just, did they feel in our community there was a need for more affordable housing? And the answer is yes. Over to you.
Thank you. So I guess, Mayor, if I might.
Go ahead.
Gee, I really wish we had a municipal intern.
You and me both.
If you recall, about a year ago, that was when I had suggested that there is money available from the federal government for affordable housing. And so far, most of that money has gone to the larger centers. And what my request was at the time was, there is a possibility we could have someone do an evaluation, assessment of our town on what do we have for affordable housing and what could we need or what could we use. So that might be the first step, is approaching the group that does that sort of thing and ask them, how much are you going to charge us to do an evaluation? And then the second part of that is, how do we tap into the funds that are available for affordable housing? And what do we got to do? What does that look like? And how do we get there? So that's really my suggestion, Mayor, is how much to do the study to determine what we have or what we need, and then how can we get all the money we can without burdening our taxpayers.
Thank you.
Fair enough.
I like the last portion.
I knew you would. That's why I threw it in.
Good show.
I do want to mention, Mayor, you might recall, and this wasn't something that had a lot of attention to it, but JD had us involved with, it was with ARDN, and they were doing basically a housing needs assessment in cooperation. They were doing it on a whole provincial level, and we were one of the communities that participated. And I will say that I think COVID complicated the study a lot. But what they did is they worked through all the social service entities in the community. JD delivered them all these questionnaires that the group had put together, asked them to give them out, asked them to get them back. So he had sent them an email before he left saying, just contact Jeff with however this tidies up. The lady emailed me today and said, here's the draft report. You want us to? And I said, yeah, go ahead. So I'll get that to you soon. But one thing I will say from the draft is the feedback was underwhelming at best. I think they got 13 responses in the whole community. And I think of those 4 said they had a need for some kind of accessible housing. So it's hardly worth finalizing the study, I think. But we'll have something, let's put it that way. I hope to see it hopefully in the next few days. But they did it province-wide, and we were one of the communities. And JD told me they were really struggling to get any feedback. They would take like 30 applications to a program at the provincial building, and 0 people would bring them back. And they'd take 30 to Epic, where they were giving out food hampers, and nobody brought them back. And so interpret that how you will, but we will have some, what I will call very limited data here soon. The study I would like to see, that we were lined up a couple of different times to do in cooperation with Lethbridge FCSS, was the point-in-time study, where they actually went and surveyed people in your downtown, in your shelters, in your, and there was kind of this proactive survey. So that's still something I'd like to see if we could get involved with. But again, I don't know what that's looking like. Well, Tara will know exactly about it, because we were actually signed up and ready to go, and then the director of the Lethbridge FCSS retired, and everything went quiet on that front. We didn't hear anything more about it. So she will be familiar with it for sure.
And it's called...
They called it a point-in-time study.
Now, the best study that we had regarding affordable housing was when we did a survey at the seniors.
Yeah, so relative to seniors, we had a good return, yes.
And we had, we went, when they had that big meeting, And we had a lot of response, and that was, what was interesting was that at that time, that's probably 4 or 5 years ago, what the seniors were looking at were housing that were more like $200,000 range type of owning your own suite or kind of apartment block or something like that. Something that would be close to downtown and something that would be affordable. So I remember we had all the developers in the area come, and we had a good visit with them all. And really, at the end of the day, what they said was, there's no money, there's no margin for us to work around that type of low amount, and so there was no taker. So maybe it's a different model that we need to kind of look at.
And can I just ask, just for clarification, when we talk about affordable housing, something pops into my mind, but I'm just not sure. Are we talking young families, elderly, like?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, the spectrum, yeah.
It's a whole spectrum.
What are our needs? Because is there a need for
That's right.
affordable housing for young families? Is there a need for affordable housing
Yeah.
for seniors? It's the whole spectrum.
I just wanted to make sure that I was.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Councillor Barnes.
Councillor Barnes?
I attended the session on affordable housing at the Red Deer Conference. Is there anybody else in the council chambers that attended that?
Yeah.
Okay. I remember them talking about, they were talking about getting 30% grants to help offset the cost. And they were saying that it would have to be a minimum of a 12 to 24 unit building that would be able to consider it being affordable. And I'm just looking at now what the cost of materials are. You know, wood materials have gone up 300%. And so that takes away a lot of affordability. So, but I think it'd be nice to find out for sure what some of the needs are. How many people want to live in an apartment style building? Because you can't build individual structures and call them affordable. I mean, it's over $200 a square foot. And now it's about $250 a square foot.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's no such thing as
Oh, sorry.
individual, single, affordable housing.
Okay. Councillor Selk, maybe we'll move on.
Okay. Just two last comments. I think we're gonna build them all out of straw, Councillor Barnes.
That's a good idea.
The second thing, Jeff
Doing it in some areas, and they cover them in cement and stucco.
Okay, no.
and Jeff,
Well insulated.
in McGrath, they have Wild Rose Place. Is that not like an affordable housing street cul-de-sac,
Yeah,
whatever?
that was
it
a
is?
program years ago where they were built and maintained at a market level. Yeah.
Right, so,
It's a
I don't know,
different
maybe
type of-
So can I throw this out? Can I get a resolution to direct administration to pursue an evaluation of the community related to affordable housing and to research funding for affordable housing initiatives?
I'll make that motion, just the way you worded it. sounds
Jen,
perfect.
I'll just Skype it to you.
Right out of your mouth.
Councillor Selk? Okay.
Trying to
All
help
in
there.
favor? Councillor Bengry, I don't see you, but we have quorum, so we're okay. All right. Let's go to 7B, Code of Conduct Report. We need a resolution.
I can do that.
Go ahead.
Can I make a resolution to approve the March 30th, 2021 Code of Conduct Compliance Report?
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. 7C, the Mercer Wild Group. Jeff, you're going to work with them to kind of,
Yeah, no,
Finish.
all is well there. We got to the end. It was a little, what the mayor's referring to is I had expressed to her that our audit was, we were the first one they did, and then we were right up against it again. We were hoping to be done a little bit earlier, even a couple of weeks ago. So the auditor actually who audits it, Patrick did the work and Sean audits it. I've talked, we're just going to meet with him and make sure they still have good capacity as an organization to service us, and that, all that's fine. And again, it's all good. We're very compliant. Everything's in the time it needs to be. There was just a couple of things that we could tell they were stretched,
Yeah.
and it was at our expense.
So, regarding the budget and all the
Good there.
thing with, I think we're done with that. The last one, 7C3, Ms. Ryan Spotted Bull. I must say I'm a little bit perplexed that there is no one at the feds or at the provincial that have picked up on the concerns that were raised at this table. So I really would appreciate if maybe, Jeff, if you could get in touch with maybe the Minister of Indian Affairs or provincial or with our MLA or...
I've reached out, Mr. Motz and I spoke briefly about this, and I reached out to FCM and I got no response. So I'll touch base again and try and understand what's going on.
I am curious to know about the change in the definition.
Yeah.
I am curious to understand that variance and
see.
what it does legally truly mean.
Yeah,
It was
I'll
an
keep
interesting
pursuing it.
point.
Yep, I'll keep pursuing it a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Motion to flux out that.
Yes,
Every politician
under
you can.
8, development report, so you have that, CRO report. Jeff, you're absolutely not busy enough.
Pick it up.
Yeah,
That's right.
you know,
And chuck it.
we keep on thinking that COVID should have slowed things down, but honestly, if it has done anything,
Nope.
it has ramped up the heat a lot. There you have the CPO report. It's interesting. There is. I am pleased to see that there is more work together with the RCMP in a walk downtown.
They were out today. He was out with you.
So I am pleased to see that because we're starting to see some drug activities on our streets that needs to be reported. If any citizens see something, it's worth calling the town or calling the RCMP. Questions, anybody? The correspondence, it's rather interesting. There again, it's a couple towns, town of Moranville and the county of Painters that decided to kind of heads regarding missing changes. But until we have the true report, it's really not right to start to take a position. We got to see the report first. Mr. Glenn Jones, passionate letter. Minister.
I have another one from Kay Olson. I just got it yesterday, so it'll be in your next one as well.
Yeah.
We reached out to like 4 or 5 people specifically.
You know, I mean, I understand them. It add a little bit of something interesting in this town. And yeah, they are droppings.
Interesting.
Just a question. So,
Go ahead.
so what are we doing with this?
Well, essentially, if council wants to bar the use of horses on our streets and of the buggies, then I don't know how it will affect the Remington. It's to me, it seems to me, if it's good for one, it's good for all. If we have the Remington get out of business because of our policies, rather senseless, but whatever.
But I don't think that was the intent. I think the intent was clean up after yourself.
Yeah, but as Dr. Jones tried to say, it's...
Nobody's asking him to stop his carriage and get out and do it right then. We're just saying go back and clean up after yourself. Take a
Go
bucket
ahead.
in your pickup truck and go clean it up.
Go
I think,
ahead.
Councillor, I'm hoping we get a little more feedback into, like I said, I just got Mr. Olson's. So I'm hoping I think we sent out 6 or 7 of people we knew. So maybe if we give it a couple more weeks and see if we get any more, and if we don't, then I'll make sure it's on an agenda for discussion.
Okay, Minister, Yeah, let's keep it for another time. Minister Rick McIver, the letter re-COVID. It's a rather very interesting letter. It starts about COVID, but really what they're trying to say is cut the red tape. That's what really the story is. Tanya Thorne as well, always thorough with all her reports. She gave us 2 reports on water.
Question, Mayor?
I'm sorry?
Question?
Go ahead.
With Mr. MacGyver's letter, he talks about our street, our businesses downtown, and the capabilities of building.
The patio.
Yes. Where we're on a major highway, that becomes quite a difficult thing. And I'm wondering if, Jeff, is there any way that we need to work with our businesses and with the Chamber of Commerce to make sure that we're doing everything that possibly we can to promote and help promote, the patios?
I'd have to check, Councillor. I'm not aware of anyone that's requested it. But I can talk to Nolan and see if there's been any hang-ups with it. I'm just not, I haven't heard it brought up at all in our community.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so Canada Post, if you remember a year ago, something like that came through also. It's, I think, a little difficult for us to take a position on a union. I think maybe it's best to let go on that one. And then that's it. We need to go in closed session.
I make a motion to go in closed session.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. And thank you to our wonderful